Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Stormkeep. My name is Paul. I am your Lord Podcast Talent, and today I'm joined by.
Hey, it's Dan, Night Lister.
Soul Render James.
Working your way up that hierarchy. Lords of the Storm has a thematic hook for us. It's each chamber is presided over by the Chamber Command, an assemblage of lords and knights that have proven themselves exceptional leaders in the Gladiatorium, which is where all the Stormcast go after they're slain in order to be reforged. They test themselves again and again every time they're slain. The heroes at the head of each strike chamber often form a council known as Lords of the Storm. This group is led by Lord Celestin, a gifted warrior and strategist who typically has around 300 Stormcast Eternals under his command. So that's our narrative hook, why we called this series the Lords of the Storm, because we feel like we are generals leading all of you guys into battle. We're helping you guys come up with good strategies, good formations, which units you want to bring, and so forth.
Yep, and unlike Lord Celestins, we have Ren too.
Nice. There's actually a fun little hook here. Lords of the Storm Battalion has been in the game since first edition. It has been of varying quality, let's say, but it's always been a nice little narrative hook. Before we jump into the episode proper, I want to talk about our sponsor, Kaiju Gaming Lounge. They are the official sponsor of the Stormkeep podcast. They're a crew of guys working out in Florida. Love working with them. They help us ship our merch all around the world, and they even help us manufacture some of the merch, like the 7-inch range sticks that you can see there. So if you're dropping in some Thunderstrike units, make sure to hit up kaijugaminglounge.com to get your 7-inch rangefinder. I think these are really cool. I actually really like using these at my local store because they have such a distinct shape compared to every other rangefinder, which are just like boring flat sticks. It kind of makes up for having no allegiance abilities when we have cool merch like this. So if you want some dice or if you want some rangefinders, hit up kaijugaminglounge.com.
Yeah, they have our cool new logo too.
Yeah. So Lords of the Storm, it is our list building series. We've been doing it for, it's been over a year now, hasn't it? It's been like a year and a half. Crazy. That's crazy. This time around, we are building lists for AOS Season 2. We will talk about specifically what Season 2 entails in case you are coming back to the game or you're just starting out Age of Sigmar for the first time and listening to our episode. We will go over some of the big stuff to look out for in Season 2. In addition to just making lists ourselves, we also asked our community to submit lists on the Discord server, and they voted for which ones they want to see on the podcast. So at the end of this episode, we will feature the top 3 rated lists, for better or for worse. And we'll have a discussion about them as if we were the ones who wrote them, and we'll try to give you our insights on them. Also new in this episode, we added these fancy little radar charts that will show you a quick glance of what a list is trying to do in terms of strengths and weaknesses. You can see just how fast or how slow a list is. So if you like playing faster stuff, maybe you avoid something like Hallowstrike below, which is a very slow, methodical list that wants to take its time and grind out your opponent. We are also going to be discussing some lists for other armies that we've been playing lately. I know James has been playing Idoneth, and Mrigank recently went 5-0 with Fyreslayers, so we have some lists to talk about there. And rather than showing, deployments for every single list for the sake of brevity, why don't you guys tell us which lists you really like, and we will do a series of spotlight videos. Our first list here was forged by our Knight Listor, Daniel. This is what we call the Stormcast Beginner Competitive List. It kind of gives you a little bit of everything. It's not too heavily focused in any particular way, but we tried to make something that is relatively low complexity, something that you can pick up and play. It has the basics of Stormcast competitive play in there. It doesn't have too many fancy tricks. It doesn't require too super good positioning. You can pretty much just move forward and hit stuff while your Vanguard Raptors shoot stuff. So Dan, run us through this list and why you picked what you did.
Yeah. I think why I picked what I did is pretty important to highlight on. Basically, this is our starter box, right? Like this is like the meme pictures that people had like 5 years ago. Where if you're looking to start in Stormcast and want to be a like a tournament player or want to get a little bit of an edge at local games, basically every unit in this list is worth picking up and is able to translate into other lists, right? This is like your kickstart. If you get every unit in this list, you can branch off into many other lists. It opens up the world of Stormcast for you. So it's just that's the goal of it. It's not meant to be the best list ever, but it is a very good list. So starting it off, we've got our standard hero package. A Relictor is going to be with High Priest and Translocate, and Arcane Tome Celestial Blades is going to be a really good just buff piece, as well as transportation to get our units around the board. And in combination with the Battle Mage, who in this particular list, which if you get a Battle Mage, you can use it as a Hish Battle Mage as well. But this one's in Gur, which will give him a +1 to cast because we're in Gur for this GHB. You can use that as a combo unit with the Relictor, and you can teleport a unit, for example, the Fulminators here or the Stormdrake Guard if you're trying to pin something. Different plays can be made with this, even Vanquishers, whatever needs to get done. You can give those units a +2 to charge with the spell from the Battle Mage, and then translocate with the Relictor out to 9 inches away. You'll have a 7-inch charge, which you can of course reroll with the command point or with Stormdrake Guard's inherent reroll, basically making it similar to an Annihilator. But yeah, that's kind of the bread and butter basic combination. And then the Castellan, you're typically going to be buffing those Fulminators so that your Hammer, who is going to be your center point for this list, stays alive. You want those Fulminators to tank whatever they need to tank. Because after they kill something, well, they usually, if they hit a big block, that block's going to be gone, and it's going to leave them open to be countercharged. So you want to make sure that those Fulminators can live through whatever they need to live through. Even though you try to screen them as much as you can. And then, of course, we have Vanguard Raptors, Longstrike Crossbows, in the Galatian Sharpshooters Battalion, so they can go ahead and get rid of any pesky heroes that are key to kill. And just generally a very good unit. They're split into 2 units to take advantage of Thunderbolt Volley, so you can shoot in the hero phase. And it's nice if you can keep 1 unit in the sky, and round it out with some Aether Wings to fill out that battalion, and give both of those units +1 to hit.
Solid. Yeah, so this list doesn't really go too far in any direction between. It's not heavily skewed in melee. It's not heavily skewed in shooting or defense. It's kind of just a middle of the road type of list. It is a little bit heavier on melee than a Stormcast list usually would go because it's got a 4 block of Fulminators which do like infinity damage. That, like you said, they'll kill whatever they hit if you get the charge off. But then it's also got the secondary squad of Stormdrake Guard that can contest flanks or be a supporting charging unit by roaring things that the Fulminators are trying to hit. So both of these units work very well together, especially the 12-inch flying move on the Stormdrake Guard is very useful. Yep. This is about the average amount of shooting you'll see in Stormcast lists. That's why we give this a 3 in shooting. 2 squads of Raptors and 1 squad of Aether Wings. That's like typical level of shooting for it's brutal. It's a devastating amount of shooting. If you play it correctly, it's going to do a lot of damage. So don't be scared off just because you see a 3 in shooting. We'll show you guys what like a 4 in shooting looks like later, and you'll just see like the difference in how many shots you can put out. But this is pretty bog standard.
Yeah, even the Fulminators and Stormdrake Guard putting out some mortal wounds helps out a little with the shooting in this list. You will notice this list compared to some of the starter competitive lists from like the last season when I first did one. This one's a 4 in defense, where the last one I would have put a 3, and that's literally because of the Castellan. The Castellan is worth a point of defense by himself on a reinforced block, as long as he's got a reinforced block to target. And this season, that defensive stat is more important than ever because of how skirmishy it is.
Yeah.
3 in shooting for Stormcast, really. That's what people hate playing against. Anything worse is just salt in the wound for them.
It's like a meat and potatoes of Stormcast. It's like, yeah, this is what we do. It doesn't get more honest than this.
Yeah. It's honest Warhammer for us.
As honest as 30 in shooting can be, I guess.
Hey man, that's our allegiance ability right there.
Yeah.
Our allegiance ability. We have stats. Good stats. For the points that you pay, they're good. Next up, we are going to talk about a Knights Excelsior list called It's Hammer Time. Because the core of this list is to put 10 Retributors in the Galatian Veterans Battalion so that they can fight in 2 ranks. And you just have them fight in the middle of the board. Forever. Ideally. Ideally, they don't die. You go with the Lord Castellan to give them a +1 save guaranteed. You go with Lord Relictor to translocate them up to the middle of the board if you need them there, or to translocate your shooting around. And he also has an Arcane Tome, which you'll generally be casting Celestial Blades or Mystic Shield with him. This has a Battle Mage in here because anytime you want to run Paladins, their 4-inch move is a huge liability, so you want the option to cast a Wild Form on them to give them +2 to charge rolls. Then you translocate them forwards with the Lord Relictor, and then hopefully you make that 7-inch charge. You can even spend a command point to reroll it if you need to. So just having the threat of that is a really useful thing to have anytime you run these 4-inch move Paladins. It is rounded out with a secondary hammer of Evocators on Celestial Dracolines. They're really good at playing the flanks, charging into stuff that isn't going to hit them back for super amount of damage. Stuff like, your opponent put 5 Vanquishers or whatever cheap battle line on an objective. Dracolines have the range and the damage to reliably get there and reliably wipe that unit out. In terms of shooting, it does use sharpshooters because when you're using veterans, you're going to have a lot of drops already. So I figured, hey, let's just go all in and get as many drops as possible, counter deploy. That way my Retributors can be exactly where they need to be. Everybody's going for these greedy 1-drops. Let's go with a 10-drop and really have the right deployment anywhere I need to be. It also goes with sharpshooters because, as I'm sure you've heard in this episode, if you don't have the damage to kill heroes, like specific heroes at specific times, some matchups can be really, really rough. If you can't kill that Thrall Master, if you can't kill that Battlesmith, if you can't kill that Knight Cruciator, though that's still easier said than done. If you don't have that capacity, some matchups are a lot more difficult. And since you're going with more drops anyway, you might as well go all in. So I've stuck 10 Judicators with Boltstorm crossbows in there. They're going to be getting all-out attack in the shooting phase, and the Vanguard Raptors with Longstrike crossbows, they get +1 hit from the Aether Wing. So both units are going to be hitting on 2s. The Vanguard Raptors with Longstrike crossbows can also activate Thunderbolt Volley in the hero phase. And you can also, if you're not translocating the Retributors that turn, you can translocate Aether Wings in range, and then you get the +1 hit with the Thunderbolt Volley. So this is a good, really just a lot of damage, and it's relying on 4-inch move units, which is terrifying. I'll be honest. I think it works because you've got a squad of Evocators in here that can play the flanks while the rest of your force is centralized in the middle of the board, contesting objectives and kind of just swaying one way or the other depending on where your opponent goes. The low speed is definitely giving me some like Fyreslayers vibes though. Like it sucks to play with an all slow list. So if you don't like slow armies, don't play this list. But if you love the idea of doing a tremendous amount of damage every single combat phase with Retributors that are, frankly, we just need a reason to use Retributors, give this one a try. I think it is pretty dang good.
Next up, we got Oops All Dragons here in its Season 2 incarnation. Typically, when you think Oops All Dragons, you're probably thinking of like 11 dragons just coming at you across the board. That is no longer an optimal way to play them. I don't think it was ever the most optimal way to play them. But for this season, this is the latest incarnation of the list. I've taken to a 7 dragons approach, or 6 dragons and a Knight Draconis, however you want to call it. But basically, this list seeks to, use a bunch of dragons, abuse the power of just the sheer amount of words on the war scroll, to be honest. It's ignoring spells on a 4-up, you've got a 3-up save, 9 wounds. 9 wounds I can get cover and Wildwood's cover. Big bases, 3-inch coherency, and they rally, which is a little ridiculous sometimes. There's so much going on with Stormdrake Guards. This list seeks to take advantage of all that. Starting off with Gardas, who's our trusty, just the best buff that we have, right? He's basically an allegiance ability at this point, and he's stronger than ever in this season, in my opinion. I think he's one of the best heroes you can include in a Stormcast list, just because of how skirmishy the game is at the moment, and how much less he has to run around, and he has to auto run 6 trying to get around the field, so it's a lot easier for him to keep up if he doesn't have to go very far. And to round out that defensive package, we got a Castellan, of course given a +1 to save, Tunnel Master to keep up with the dragons, just because he does have quite a big range, but it's still, it's good to have flexibility. Make sure you get around the board. You can still do some tactics with that. And then a Knight Draconis as the general with Celestial Blades, Master of Magic, and Scintillating Trail, just leaning heavy into the magic there. Because if we do get Celestial Blades off, we want to make sure that, we have the best chance possible of it sticking, or rather Mystic Shield. Mystic Shield is going to be the go-to for this list. The whole idea is to take the Castellan, give the Storm Drakes a +1 to save. Knight Draconis casting Mystic Shield, the -1 to be unbound, and giving it to those Drakes for a native +2. You're down to a 1-up save, which is very nice, and a 5 award from Gardas. The Draconis is also nice because you can double tap those 4 Drakes. It's really the only way to make it worth it to take him is to have a block of 4 to make him double tap the shooting. So basically, in the hero phase, once per game they can shoot. Can help make up and smooth out the damage curve. That's the way I think about it. I don't really think about it as a second shot, like in a Thunderbolt Volley sense, but rather it helps to make sure the damage is normalized, because sometimes you'll roll those 4 dice and you'll miss on 2, and you'll feel kind of bad. But if you already shot in the hero phase, that helps out. It can help get them out of combat and have them, start moving to the next target. If you've got something that's just got a bit of wounds left, it always feels bad to have like 3 models or 4 models tying you up. If you blow some breath at them, get out of the way, start moving, keep your momentum going. That's super important. I always try to save it for those occasions where I can, because keeping your momentum going with this list is super important. Yeah, you can't be tied up in places where you don't want to be tied up, right? You don't want to be tied up off an objective. That's the worst case scenario. Other than that, you've got your 4 block of Stormkeep Guard, which are going to be buffed up to the 9s, making sure they're the ones doing all the damage and tanking everything, making sure that people aren't paying attention to your other unit of Stormkeep Guard and your Raptors. The Raptors are a neat inclusion. I had Fulminators here at one point, and recently it would probably be Dracolines, but having 3 melee units like that and relying on that, the Raptors being alone and being able to give me a Thunderbolt volley for a little bit of burst. What I think about the Raptors is supplementary damage, right? They're hitting a target that the Stormkeep Guard is going to hit. Stormkeep Guard don't necessarily hit the hardest, but combined with Raptors, it really helps them take out tough targets. So it just helps. They sit on objectives. You'll put them in Scions, bring them down somewhere where you think they're going to be for the rest of the game. They might move 4 inches, at a time towards something, but otherwise they're pretty much an artillery piece. And then of course 5 Vanquishers round out the battle line. A little bit of screening. Other than that, this list is simpler than something like Dueling Dragons, so it's definitely a 2 in complexity. However, it's very fast. It's one of our fastest lists with all of the units moving 12 inches. Definitely a 5 in movement. In Magic, we still give it a 2.5 just because we do have Celestial Blades, Scintillating Trill, and Master of Magic helping our Magic package out, along with the Drakes themselves, all ignoring spells on a 4-up. It's pretty good if you ever face Zinch. Sure, you're going to have a tough time with their horrors, but they're going to have a tough time doing any damage to you. So it's like a big wet noodle fight, which is always good. Speaking of the wet noodle fight, in melee, we do have a 4 in melee here just because there's a sheer amount of melee between the main block of Stormkeep Guard, along with the side block, and the Draconis himself, who's really clutch with his Ren 3. He can really take stuff out, opens the tactic for this one's mine, which is really nice in the list. Shooting, it's a pretty average amount of shooting considering that we've only got 1 set of Raptors, but between all the Stormkeep Guard, shooting as well as the double tap, that helps bring it out to about an average amount of shooting output. The dragons are fast, so even though it's a 12-inch shot, I mean, it's getting to where it needs to get to pretty much. In defense, this is about as defensive as you can get. There's points to be made on whether something, like a fully buffed out Karazai list, for example, could be a bit more defensive, but overall, this is what our top defensive lists look like. Something like this, buffed up protectors, or like a Saint Karazai list, is going to be like our top defensive list.
Oh yeah, so tons of wounds, really high armor saves, the ability to roar and stomp or roar and smash. Guard is 5-up board on top of the big wounds, and then the final piece on top of all magic. That, the 4-up magic, and then the final piece is that you can rally back Drakes sometimes, and if that ever happens, you probably are going to win the game because it's such a ridiculous swing.
Use it so much. I've rallied back 2 Drakes in a single rally, and that was like the highest I've ever been in my life. Not that anyways, I should talk about it.
Are there any swaps you'd make to this list? Like, would you consider dropping the Vanguard Raptors for like Dracolines, like you said, and then taking like Call for Aid instead?
You could definitely do that. I did find that, so with Dueling Dragons, I did go with the Dracolines because I didn't have a side melee hammer like the secondary Storm Drakes. But between the Night Draconis, the 4 block of Storm Drakes, and the 2 block of Storm Drakes, you've got a lot of things that want to be tied up in melee. And I really saw the supplemental damage from the Raptors being able to help any one of those melee units with whatever combat. It feels like it's very flexible in the damage that I can do. And of course, shooting being, somewhat non-interactive, it helps that piece can just keep shooting every turn. And all my gains with this list, those Raptors pretty much never died because if you're hitting those Raptors and you're not hitting my dragons, then you're gonna have a bad time. So,
speaking of bad time, how do you feel about Thunderbolt Volley without Aether Wings?
Oh, Thunderbolt Volley without Aether Wings. It's all right. I mean, it's not, it's not meant to be like the the most amount of damage. You're not sniping any heroes anyway, right? This isn't gonna snipe any heroes because it doesn't have sharpshooters. Though it is very nice when it does. When we don't need sharpshooters like last season, it was pretty nice because you could definitely snipe out a hero. But either way, like I said, supplemental damage. That's what they're really doing. They're not here to be a critical mass of damage. So I wouldn't even count them as a real hammer in this list at all. They're still really decent. You'd be surprised. I was surprised that 3 Vanguard Raptors could be so effective. But this list has a lot less flexibility than Dueling Dragons, for example.
Yeah, having to take the Draconis as the general eats up so many points.
Yep, and you're trying to take those Storm Drake Guard. I mean, it's all about getting a critical mass of dragons on the field that just don't care about magic. They don't care about a lot of things. They don't even take the Gargant's special monster rules. Like their whole thing is being season agnostic, like we talked about in our tier list review. And this list does that really well because it accesses our book tactics, which is why this list even works in the first place.
Do you think you'd ever run double reinforced Storm Drake Guard?
Double reinforced? I'm not gonna lie. I definitely played around with it, but it's extremely janky and the points are super janky. Like the points on Storm Drake Guard, if they came down even like 20 points, I could see a 6 dragon list. I could see it. I really could, because like you'd be like spanning the battlefield. Like it would be interesting. You'd really have to play well, and it would only really work in this season, with this kind of map pack.
Yeah,
it wouldn't work with
clog up the middle of the board with super tanky unit.
But yeah,
cool. It looks like a good iteration on that classic list archetype.
Probably the only Stormcast list I've actually written this season so far. Just wanted to give the new battalions a try and sort of like glance over with Stormcast. I'm leaning more and more into liking Azerite Halo, especially looking into the builds I'm doing with Deepkin, with the high volume of attacks and high volume of shooting. So we've got Galatian Command Lord Castellan with Quicksilver Draft and Tunnel Master, as well as 5 Retributors. Guard of Steel Soul auto include in Hallowed Knights, Lord Arcanum on Torlon, with the Arcane Tome for 2 casts. He's going to be bringing the Azerite Halo, and then he'd cast a Mystic Shield as a second cast. Knight Relictor, just because I wanted to save on points, giving him the High Priest and Translocation. Battle line slots are met with 2 squads of Vanquishers and 2 squads of Boltstorms, and then a squad of Fulminators as a secondary hammer. So sort of gimmick of this list is, in my mind anyway, was to put the Retributors on the table, crossbows in the air, and then just save stack or save stack and Azerite Halo onto the Retributors, translocate them up the board and maybe into like a center objective, and then have the Castellan Tunnel Master over to them, so that way you can enable the defensive Quicksilver combo on the opponent turn.
Yeah, solid. It looks like almost like a variant on the initial Hallowstrike list that we put together, which had a Toralon in it for battle tactics and for roar. And I like that you've slotted it back in here. It doesn't feel like you've lost too much in terms of damage and units, because you've still, like, the +1 hit on MSU crossbow adjudicators is really interesting. Like I think I'm going to mess with that some more. The idea of running 15 adjudicators in squads of 3 squads of 5 with a Toralon buffing them all up, and then he's also contributing roar, which really helps in some matchups. I think I might go Azerite Halo, like the tome. I might put that on the on the Relictor instead, just because if he's not translocating, he does literally nothing, and it feels awful. So giving him something else to do is really good. The Toralon is just going to cast Mystic Shield and Azerite Halo, right?
Yeah.
If you're the problem I see with Halo, and Halo's really good against certain things, but it's also totally useless against other things, right? Like it's not gonna do any amount of damage against Gargants, usually not against other Stormcast lists. Anything that's doing mortal wounds, it's not proccing off that. And if you put it on something, it's almost like you have to force your opponent to do damage to it. And so I really like it with like Aether Wings or a Stormstrike Chariot, these like disposable units that you're going to force your opponent to attack in order to clear out, make space, or you just charge in and your opponent has to attack them. Especially on a Chariot, it's really useful. On 5 Retributors, if you're fighting first, you're not getting any you're not getting any benefit from Halo. I think I'd go Celestial Blades here instead, honestly.
Fair.
Just
that's
because
fair.
you can control the damage output. Like Fulminators with Blades, brutal, right? Like you'll kill pretty much everything. But it's good, man. You're making me want to get the Torlon out of the display case again. It's been in there for so long. Oh man. Well, what do you think about the 5 Retributors? Have you tried this yet? Or because I'm thinking of trying out that Hammer Time list that we were talking about earlier in this episode with the 10 Retributors and Galatian Veterans. What do you think about just a 5-man squad?
I mean, Retributors sound appealing to me this meta. That's about all I'll say about that. I want to play with them.
Mm-hmm.
Even your list, the Hammer Time list, seems like a fun one that I want to try out.
Their damage is just so high for a 5-man unit. It's like Chaos
They're melee.
Chosen. It's amazing.
Yeah. They're melee long strikes.
Pretty much. They're a lot. They do a lot more damage than long strikes, though.
That's true.
Yeah. Solid list, man. I like it. One thing we haven't really talked about is grand strategies, right? So this one here, you picked Day is Ours, but you only actually have 2 GCs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know here. Day is Ours just came to mind because I figured that it'd be easy enough to take out the opponent GCs, or depending on the matchup, they might just forego GCs for other things.
Mm-hmm.
And with this, at the very least, you're defending that Castellan, or the Castellan can just get away. Same thing with the Knight Relictor, too. He can just translocate himself out of danger, in theory. But
yeah, anytime I take Sharpshooters, I want to take Day is Ours. Just because you can control... Almost nobody else is taking Sharpshooters, it feels like. Stormcast seem to be like the only army that really wants it. So being able to control how many you've killed, even though it might not be the best tactical decision at that moment, by the time you're getting into round 4, round 5, you're thinking the extra 3 points from just sniping off heroes, it could definitely add up.
Yep.
Plus, because you're running a Galatian Command, that opens you up to that battle tactic, Matter of Honor, to club a champion or other sworn bodyguard to death. That could definitely occur as well. So I like that. Even though you've only got 2 GCs, the fact that you're running the command gives you another battle tactic potentially.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's another thing I've been noticing people have just sort of been like foregoing in this meta is, I'll admit the commands are really not, I don't want to say not that great, but they're not the easiest to get, mostly because they're not optimized, and then like half the battle plans are impossible to get, so they're kind of null. But the Day is Ours, or sorry, Matter of Honor, that one is literally null if the players just don't bring bodyguards.
Well, you can hit a GC as well. So it's
Yeah,
either
you could do just a champion.
Yeah, your champion or your bodyguard has to destroy a champion or a bodyguard.
But if you don't bring bodyguards, then what's the chances that you're going to have champion on champion?
Almost zero. Almost zero. Like
champion on champion violence.
But if you have a bodyguard, you can just walk up and club a champion, and that would give you 2 points. So
and that's more likely to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's actually, I've been considering running 6 long strikes in Galatian Command just for that battle tactic.
Yeah.
It's a possibility, because it doesn't specify it has to be melee attacks, and you don't have to have a melee infantry unit. It's just infantry, so
it's just annoying because you won't have sharpshooters.
Yeah, but that's why you bring more long strikes.
Yep.
Alright. Well,
we haven't talked about 9L yet. We will get there.
To each their own. Okay, yeah. At this point, yep.
Up next is the Dracoth Blizzard. Some people may remember this list from previous Lords of the Storm episode, where I had hypothesized that if you wanted to play a battle regiment with fulminators and crossbows, you could force the opponent to go first, make them move into the middle of the board, and that would get rid of the weakness of running fulminators and crossbows together, because they're both kind of mid-range units. Fulminators only move 10 inches, crossbows only shoot 18 inches, so you kind of have struggles with longer range threats. However, With this season, that's not an issue anymore because everybody's fighting in the middle of the board, more or less. So you still want to go Battle Regiment. You just want to do max damage with your Fulminators, and you still want really good defenses. This is the list for you. So let me run it through for you guys. You run a Lord Relictor, but you don't run Translocation. You run Divine Light because you don't really need to translocate anything here. Everything's just going to fight in the middle of the board and shoot in the middle of the board. You're not doing any of that fancy flanking objective nonsense. That's not for you. You've got Evocators for that. They'll do fine. Instead, you run Divine Light, which you just allows you to reroll hit rolls of 1 in both melee and shooting against one unit. And that allows you to get max damage on Fulminators. When you combine that, especially with the Celestial Vindicator's ability to get Exploding Hit 6 on the charge, your Fulminators will do the most damage, even more than the most damage, more than they normally do, which is very impressive. Nothing will survive this, I guarantee it. Lord Castellan is your general. He is there to buff up the 4 block of Fulminators with +1 save, and then with a Celestial Blades. And then using Master of Magic, that's pretty reliable. You can also cast a Mystic Shield with him. I generally advise doing that if you're going up against higher Ren targets. If you're going up against like Slaves to Darkness and they're Ren 2 Lances on the charge, you might opt in for a Mystic Shield instead. A Battle Mage is present here with the Hish. He's got Faw's Protection. We've been talking about that for this whole video. It's a -1 hit spell, so that keeps your Fulminators nice and healthy the whole time. It's rounded out with 2 squads of 5 Sequitors. These guys can just play side objectives and activate their ward or activate higher damage as needed. 10 squad of Judicators with Boltstorm crossbows to add in a Shooting Hammer. 3 Evocators to play the flanks. You can keep these guys running around the sides while the heavy damage is trying to kill your Fulminators. Your Evocators are running around the flanks and taking out weaker battle line units that are just holding objectives. And with their 12-inch move, they come with their own Empower, so you don't have to give them Celestial Blades. And they have a reroll charge, so you don't have to waste command points on that. And also you can reroll charges on them and Fulminators in the same turn if you need to. And then finally, to fill out the Battle Regiment, we opted for a Frostheart Phoenix. Now, the Frostheart Phoenix has a really cool ability. Melee weapons within 9 inches are -1 to wound, so this is how you keep your Fulminators alive against Alpha Strikes. And when they're in the middle of the board, you just have a Frostheart Phoenix protecting your 4 block of Fulms, stacked on top of a Battle Mage, giving them -1 hit. Castellan giving them +2 saves, all out defense. You're looking at a super, super tanky unit of Fulminators. Yep, very straightforward list. You just, easy to play, like almost, because it doesn't have translocation. You're looking at like super easy to play. The only hard part of this list is getting your hands on a Frostheart Phoenix, because who knows what's going to happen to Cities of Sigmar in the fall later this year. Yeah, I quite like this list. It's very unassuming, but the power is there because damage is utility. This has a lot of damage. This is the most damage. Like, it's almost as much melee damage as Stormcast can possibly do.
This is like, see those that reinforced block of horrors? Want to see a magic trick?
Yeah, it's just gone, man. Like, you don't get tied down with this. Whatever you charge, you will obliterate. And I also really like the Frostheart Phoenix to just fly in and roar stuff sometimes, you know, as a supporting charge unit next to the Fulminators. Kind of like a chariot, except instead of mortal wounds, it roars. Yep.
Yeah.
Pretty solid list.
Ooh. All right. So having my Annihilators be not though so good this season, I have been in search for a new list. Currently, I'm gravitating between 2. Other than Hammer Time, the one I'm looking at is the Dracoth Blizzard. I've always been intrigued by Celestial Vindicators. It's a faction that I wanted to see play, but we could just not fit it in any season. But in this, so what we're trying in this list is sort of like a back to basics, but with different units. We have the Lord Relictor with Divine Light, Lord Castellan with Arcane Tome, Celestial Blades, Master of Magic, a Battle Mage of Hish. And what we want to do is make the main hammer in this unit, or one of the 2 hammers, you could say Evocators or Fulminators. We want to give them all the buffs we can. We want to make them as tough as we were trying to make those dragons, as in Daniel's Dueling Dragons list. And the Judicators are there for fire support. And obviously, the Blizzard comes from the Frostheart Phoenix from Cities of Sigmar, who is an excellent unit that gives out a 9-inch aura of -1 to wound, which is really, really good. It's a really powerful debuff to have. It also gives you access to a Monstrous Rampage, which can be really relevant trying to push Fulminator damage through, or Evocator damage through. So yeah, the battle line you're taking Judicators and Sequitors. I could see like downgrading those Sequitors to Vanquishers if you really want to Triumph or an Endless Spell, maybe. Um, the only thing maybe this list might struggle with is since this meta is about us sniping key GCs, like against like specialty armies like Gits, sometimes Slaves to Darkness. This list doesn't snipe at all, and without something to cancel out all-out defense, those Judicators might struggle against some armor. So, something to consider.
Yeah, some Geminids might be a pretty good inclusion here, although slaves can, ignore it on a 5-up after you roll a 2-up, so still some dice rolls that have to get through there. But I think with the Frostheart Phoenix roaring, the Fulminators should be able to clean up melee, because this list is max damage. Like, this is the highest possible melee damage you can do in a Stormcast army. You've got Divine Light, Exploding Sixes, +1/+1, and then you've got all the defenses in the world to keep that unit alive, so it can do it again later.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, this list is a little weaker on shooting compared to some of our Raptor crossbow hybrids or just Vanguard Raptors, but it's fine. This is Celestial Vindicators. They don't want to be shooting things. They want to hit you in the face. So
yeah, well, we'll definitely be referencing this one again on an upcoming video about drops in battalions. It's kind of an interesting, the way we formed this one, it kind of created an interesting discussion. So this is not the last time you'll be seeing this list on this podcast.
I actually quite like this because a lot of people are trying 3 drops right now, 3 and 4 drops. So the fact that we can make a viable 1-drop list is actually pretty good.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Dueling Dragons is a list I came up with last season, but was actually based around a Kronspine originally, and then it's kind of evolved from that and basically saying, hey, so the Nitroconus is overcosted, and his effect can be a little swingy, because shooting twice is, only as good as your dice are, to more of an extent than normal. So I was like, hey, what if we just take that guy out? And then I'm like, well, I'm playing Hollowed Knights, Gardas. I've got to have, 2 Vanquishers, and I'm like, well, I don't want to have a third Vanquisher unit. So crossbows. Crossbows work really well with dragons. They work really, really well with dragons. Dragons are somewhat low on the max damage output, even if they are, pretty consistently annoying. And dragons naturally make a really big wall. So I'm like, hey, what if I just move my dragons up the board? I have a lot of speed. I've got Judicators in the sky along with Gardas. I drop it down and I make a little castle. Naturally, I've got Vanquishers to help screen things out. A Castellant to make those dragons nice and tough. And this season we have Tunnel Master on the Castellant, which is super nice because sometimes your dragons will go a little bit out of range of Mystic Shield mostly. His Lantern can stay in range pretty well, but Mystic Shield is probably one of the harder ones to keep in range. So Tunnel Master helps keep your Castellant up and with the castle. And I've usually had either something like Double Chariot or some Fulminator, something on the side to help be another fast unit and harass the flanks. Just be a generally good unit this season with the I've always wanted to put Dracolines in this list, and this season, now that Dracolines are the same price as Fulminators, they just make so much sense. So Dracolines bring a whole nother unbind, which sounds not that important, but it really is very good. Even with dragons ignoring spells, you still want to be able to affect what the other person is doing. If they've got endless spells, different spells that you want to unbind, especially against something like Lumineth. Sure, they have great casting, but sometimes you get lucky and you roll really good. The more chances you have, the more you can interrupt what the opponent is doing. And you don't want to always rely on the 4-up of dragons ignoring things, and you've still got other units that need to survive and not be affected. So Dracolines make sense there. They buff themselves. They are faster than Fulminators, so they're a 12-inch move. They keep up with the dragons extremely well. Their 4-up save is not an issue in this list. People are going to need to target the dragons. If they're spending their time on shooting your Dracolines, great. That's fine. That's more dragon time. So more Judicator time, honestly, too. So yeah, the Evocators are perfect in this role. They're fast. They bring some mortals. They bring some max damage output, which is again, combining with the crossbows to fill out what dragons may lack a little bit. So this list actually does quite a lot of max damage output in a variety of ways. It's not just like one concentrated hammer. This list is a very spread out threat list. And Gardas is of course, giving everything. You've got dragons on a ward on a 5-up board. It's just good, right? Same as Oops. This season, instead of having like a chariot on the side, we've got a Knight Azuros to give us a little bit more GC tactic potential. He's also 12-inch move, super good. We've talked about it before. The nice buff on +1 to hit is great for multi-charging if you need to with the Dracolines, for example. So it helps. It helps a lot. He's just a good buffer, a good unit. You could swap him out for a Knight Incanter if you really want to in this list. That's also possible, as well as Knight Zephyros if you think that the teleporting is going to be a little more useful to you. But Azuros brings quite a lot of utility with his speed for tactics and the lantern for multi-charging. So that's why I prefer him the most. But a Knight Incanter is definitely a great pick, especially if you have a lot of Lumineth in your area.
Yeah, being able to deny that one crucial spell per game. And against slaves, that spell is obviously Mystic Shield, which is or Demonic Speed, whatever works. Can I ask a question? The Knight Azuros could also be something like a Lord Relictor, because there are 30 points left over. Would you consider a priest in this list? Because this is one of the few Stormcast lists that doesn't have a priest yet.
I could. You could definitely put a Lord Relictor in there. I prefer to go for the Triumph when I have something like 10 crossbows, just because 10 crossbows isn't quite as impactful as 15, and 1970 is super comfy for a Triumph. That's kind of my reasoning there. And even if I did take a Relictor in this list, I would want to take something like Bless Weapons. Like I would actually want to take something that's a buffer more than Translocate, which seems weird.
Mm-hmm.
But
Maybe...
just the way this list plays in this season, I just need things to be doing the damage they need to do, and it's a brawl control-y list.
Right. Well, maybe a Divine Light Relictor might be the way to go. Especially if you're going Battle Regiment, you can force them to go first and walk into that 18-inch range.
Could do it, yeah. Divine Light definitely possible, but I think I'd probably still go Blessed Weapons just to make the dragons more effective, personally. Yeah,
that's actually fair. Yeah, it's a toss up between those two. Honestly, what I really like the Relictor here is like for the Healing Storm, because dragons don't have a lot of healing generally. Yeah,
that's not a bad idea either. Like and that's what I like about this list more than like Oops, for example. Oops is very constrained, right? Like you have to build it with the restrictions in mind. This list is much more open. And you can swap things out. Like you don't have to take Evocators and Dracolines. You could really swap out the Azuros and Evocators and flex whatever you want in those spots. Even the Castlant isn't necessarily a must take, but the core is pretty much Gardas, Dragons, Crossbows. That's the true.
I think the Castlant is sort of the idea is to make that floor block really, really tough, and like nothing makes things tougher than like a Lord Castellan.
Sure. Well, you could also look at a Battle Mage too, for Frost protection, and maybe use points elsewhere, right? Like you can customize this list to your own liking, and that's what I like about it too.
Yeah, you could go Battle Mage and like Geminids that would fit in here.
Yeah, you can throw the points around 100 different ways. You could get like Terror Wings. Actually, I think I might go. Battle Mage.
Think of that.
I don't think there's enough points for Terror Wings. You'd have to cut the Dracolines.
Oh, you could go Battle Mage, cut the Evocators to a Stormstrike Chariot, and go Terror Wings.
Yeah. So there's different ways to do it. I personally think this is probably my favorite way that maximizes the damage output that we really want to maximize this season.
Well, the Stormdrake Judicator crossbow combo is something we've been talking about since we started this channel, pretty much. I remember that was a natural combo. We loved that, but back then that was when we had a lot more tools. We had the hero phase move. We had the double to do the reinforced volley on the 15 Judicators and then teleport them forwards and do it again. And then the Stormdrake Guard could issue volley. That felt great.
Yeah, we were. Oh man, we were so babied. Now we have to really work for it.
But these units still just naturally work well together. They're fantastic. Yep. So I had an idea on the Discord server one day. What if, instead of 4 Tempesters, which we've used in the past, what if we ran 6 Tempesters? Why stop at 4? Why not have a single squad of 6? And I started thinking of the pros and cons of that idea. The big pros being it's 36 wounds of a shooting hammer that also has good melee attacks and also has a 3+ save. So unlike our other shooting hammers, if you just stick it in the middle of the board, how does your opponent react to that? Right? Like, Dan, you've played a lot of dragon lists, and that's what you love to do. You love to stick the dragons in the middle, give them a whole bunch of defensive stuff. And how your opponent typically plays around that is like tiptoeing around the edges of the unit and going around it or through it with some flying units or something, just not engaging with it unless like they have to, right? They just try to pin you down so that your defense and your offense just get no value. And that works for the most part because Drakes, they don't really do a lot of range damage. They're all melee, right? So if they get stuck, and they're not even the highest melee damage. They're kind of like mid-tier melee. What if the Drakes shot like Skybolt Judicators? They just had really, really, really good shooting.
Like they actually had like a Skybolt Judicator on their back instead of like
yeah, like how we joke the Star Drake has a Judicator in its mouth. These guys have Judicators in their mouths too. And that's kind of the concept, right? And so everything's built around that. Castellan here to give him +1 save. High Priest, Translocate Relictor to teleport them into the middle of the board. Usually also casting Celestial Blades on them in case they do get stuck in combat. It's rounded out with a Lore Seeker, which is a very fun Lumineth ally that allows you to deploy him anywhere and then automatically cast the Purple Sun of Shaiish, because the only thing better than crossbows at Rend 1 is crossbows at Rend 2. Filling up battle line with 2 units of Vanquishers. It's adding some speed to play the flanks with a Chariot and Celestial Dracolines. I really, really like having Evocators on Dracolines. I think we underrated them in our tier list, frankly. And then it's also got a Battle Mage slotted in here. That does give it a 2-drop instead of a potential 1-drop, so you don't have that control over the first turn, which you kind of want with a 12-inch shooting list. But the Battle Mage in here allows you to get a +1 Mystic Shield, which frees you up for your Lord Relictor to try to cast like Geminids of Ulgish or something like that, because the only thing better than Rend 2 crossbows is Rend 2 crossbows and your opponent can't use all out defense. So Slaves to Darkness all of a sudden saving on 5s, which is brutal. So that's the list. You take your big block of Tempesters, you stick them in the middle of the board, your Evocators and Chariots play the flanks, while your support package follows your Tempesters around. And it's been doing well for me. I got to play test this one more, but I actually really like this list because thinking about how you would respond to it, it's not easy. It is not easy to find efficient responses to that block of Tempesters sitting in the middle of the board. So if you have 6 Dracoths and you were really, really smart and you magnetized them, or you followed our guide in the Discord server in the Storm FAQ channel, give this, what I'm calling the Golden Tempest, a try. It's not like any other list you've played. You've played lists where you shove a durable melee unit in the middle of the board. You haven't played lists where that unit also shoots, and it's pretty wild.
Yeah, coming out of season where I just played Stormcast exclusively, Purple Sun and Tempesters are like one of the, like, I can't name a better duo type thing.
Yeah, well, I originally had Krondus in here, but after some playtesting, I found that he was just too expensive, and this list ended up lacking bodies, because when you have a double reinforced Tempester block, you don't really have a lot of tactical options left. And I found that the Lore Seeker, Purple Sun, along with a Chariot and a Battle Mage, just ended up suiting the list better. There's a better use of points than Krondus was.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to get a question about, you lose melee attacks if you have coherency issues with this unit. And yes, that's true. You will. But you can have 4 guys in front, 2 guys in the back, and they'll all be in range to shoot. Because you can kind of do like a split, kind of like a weird... I'll have to draw a picture of this and edit this in. Or maybe just hopefully find a photo from one of my games. But you can actually have like 2 guys turned around on the side like this, and then 2 guys in the middle, and then 2 guys on the side like this, and all of your 12-inch shooting. You can easily get in range. All you miss out on is 2 guys in melee attacks. And that's not the end of the world, right? If you get fully surrounded, you still get those melee attacks off. So definitely still possible if you're playing against like bigger units, like if you're playing against Bladegeist Revenants, and they are charging in and trying to get a full wrap on you, well, you can still actually get all of your attacks off in melee as well. So even
plus, if you lose a Tempester, you actually gain the benefit of coherency at that point.
Yeah. And
actually,
with a unit of 6 Tempesters, as you start losing stuff, which frankly is not going to be easy, especially if you switch this Battle Mage from Gur to Hish, and you have -1 hit on the Tempesters as well, it actually takes a lot of effort to kill them, but even if you do, you can start rallying them back. It's even grosser than rallying Storm Drakes, because you have more models that you can potentially roll dice for, so it's more likely to rally.
6 wounds a pop.
So, yeah. I rallied back 18 wounds. It's stupid. But yeah, give this list a try. I'm going to keep iterating on this one and testing this one. I really like it so far.
Yeah, I think this one operates very similarly. That's when you brought up the dragon thing. It really does operate very similarly to a dueling dragon style, except combining the Judicators and the dragons into one unit, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's way higher damage output. It feels pretty good. Not in melee necessarily, right? Because like the Drakes have a better melee attack than these guys would, but combine the shooting, you just shoot yourself out of melee and then you charge something else. Like it feels really good.
Yeah, it looks good. Jeez. Looks fun.
I don't know how to deal with this if I faced it. You know, like unless you can do huge mortal wounds, like Splintered Fang or Gitz level mortal wounds, I don't think you're getting through this.
You don't think Chosen fight twice with some knight support to soak up the charge could do it?
I think in that matchup you just you let them go first because you're a 2-drop. And then you just ignore the knights, teleport into the middle of the board, kill the Chosen.
Yeah. I don't want to say it's a foregone conclusion, but
Seems favorable.
I mean,
it definitely seems favorable.
It seems we're a lot more mobile for sure. Plus, we got Evocators and Stormstrike Chariots, and that Purple Sun really does a number on Slaves of Darkness armor. So yeah,
they can't ignore it, right? And they're terrible at dispelling. That army is just really bad at dispelling overall.
Oh, that heroic. Oh yeah, it's only for casting.
Yeah, only casting. I don't think Lumineth even have the volume necessary to deal with this, because when you teleport, you kill a unit of Sentinels, right? They don't. The way people are playing Lumineth right now is there's not enough units to fully screen out a teleport on one of the flanks to kill the Sentinels. So when you teleport, you kill a unit of Sentinels, and you can probably Battle Mage charge in.
I think they can screen out Sentinels.
You think so?
Yeah.
All 60 of them?
So the 60 list is a one-off. Even then, like, so the ideal Helon list wants to play 40 Sentinels with tech lists, and then, like, obviously non-tech lists can do whatever the fuck. But really, to win matches, what they've proven is they need 40 Sentinels. If they want to sacrifice, if they want to sacrifice about like 20 Sentinels to your your Tempest teleport, that's fine. Also, like, Shining Company is relevant because you'll be hitting on 3s, not 2s, like you normally would.
I think this would definitely struggle into the techless variant, but against the non-techless variants, which I honestly think are stronger, so I think you'll start to see more and more of them. I think techless is gonna get phased out more or less. He'll still be prominent, but I think it's gonna do better against.
Yeah, I don't know if he'll be phased out because it's like a crutch, right? It's like there's some DOK lists, like the non-Marathi lists, have actually done better if you look at like straight record. It's just that Marathi is such a crutch, and like, you know, if you're not a very savvy player, you want to run the crutch to compensate for that.
Yeah, and then you look at a matchup like Ogres, right? They might have the bodies to screen you out, but you can also just eat the shots from the Ogres, especially if you go Hish Battle Mage. Then you got Iron Blasters hitting you on 5s.
Oh yeah, you're right.
And then you're saving on 3s because you all out defense. They can't stop it. So that's a good looking matchup for this. Stonehorn's not going to do enough damage. He's only Ren 2. He's just gonna bounce off.
Yeah.
And if he tries to charge, like, he can't charge. Maybe he gets like a super long 3d6 rampage and he just, you know, runs to a different unit. But otherwise, he's stuck fighting the Tempesters until they kill him.
I mean, that list will basically try to Iron Blaster you down, hitting you with 30 shots at, I guess, 3s and 3s, -2.
It'll be on 4s and 3s because Hish Battle Mage. I'm thinking Hish is probably the way to go. Yeah. I wrote Gur here because I had some plans about charging that unit in, but after thinking about it, I don't think you need to charge this unit. It takes up so much space in the middle of the board. You just sit there and contest whatever you do.
And Tempesters generate so much value because even if they don't charge, you get to unleash hell into something.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can always just drop a screen of Vanquishers in front if you're worried about some kind of super kill squad. Like, maybe they got a 15 brick of Blade Lords just making stuff up here, right? And you want to avoid all those mortal wounds. You can drop screens in front as well. So next up on the Stormkeep is our first and only Stormkeep list in this episode. We tried to build a few more, but they all ended up coming short. This is the one, though, that I think I think this one's got some steam. There's a pun here with Frostpunk and Steam and Frostwall. Anyway,
Frostpunk was a cool game.
It was really cold. It was really good. All right, Battle Regiment, because when you play Stormkeep, you can't drop units into play, and that means you either want to force your opponent to go first so that you can move into the middle and engage on them, or you want to take an aggressive turn and get into the middle first using your Translocate High Priest combo from the Lord Relictor. The core of the list is a 15 Vindictor block. You want to give that unit +1 to save with the Lord Castellan, and then a Mystic Shield from a Lord Castellan as well, because he has the Arcane Tome. You want to run 6 Gardas as far forward as possible to support the Vindictors that you've just translocated forwards. You want to move your Judicators up to keep shooting stuff, and you want all of that supported on the sides with Stormstrike Chariot and Dracolines and a Frostheart Phoenix. So the idea here is you are just grinding your opponent out in the middle of the board. Using Stormkeep, you can have like 3 models on an objective and steal it from most units in the game. Just the way, at least that's been my experience this season. Like, you have 5 Stormkeep models on an objective, that's your objective. Your opponent, unless they're a Gargant, they're not contesting it. Turns out Expert Conquerors, when you're the only person who can use Expert Conquerors, is really, really good. Especially this season, there are so many objectives that start just on the tippy toe edge of your territory. So rounds 1 and 2, the Stormkeep bonus kicks in, and you can immediately take advantage of that.
Side note, you know what feels good?
What's that?
When you have 2 Gargants closing in on your home objective in Only the Worthy, and you just tiptoe a Galatian Champion onto that objective.
Yeah, or if you're using Stubborn as a Rhinox as well, that one's really fun.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much what this is trying to do, is just bully people off objectives. You'll notice it is not. It doesn't have that much melee damage. Like 15 Vindictors and 3 Evocators is not a lot of melee damage. Even if it does have a Stormstrike Chariot supporting it with charge mortal wounds, it's not high output, but it is very high defense. That's 30 wounds of Vindictors with a 5-up ward. They will have Mystic Shield, all at defense, and the Castellan buff, so they're going to be ignoring a lot of rend and saving on 2s. Frostheart Phoenix floating around nearby to roar enemies and give you a -1 wound effect. Super tanky block of 15 Vindictors. I have to play test this one more. I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to play this one too many times, but it feels good. It actually feels like I'm playing Stormkeep and it's useful. This is potentially better than playing Scions in this style.
No fuzz protection?
No, don't have the points for it. Only 3 leader slots in a battle regiment, unfortunately. And Relictor, Castellan, Gardas are too important.
Yeah, I think this has everything you need, and it does it properly. And I just love that the Frostheart Phoenix is a behemoth slot. Like, that's just the icing on the cake, bringing the list together.
Mm-hmm. See, this list originally started out as trying to drop 15 Vindictors into play with the Lord Imperator and tie down your opponent. And every time I thought about that, it's like, well, I'm just gonna die. Like,
why?
They're not going to pin anything. Like 30 wounds on a 3+ is not strong enough to pin anything. So what you want to do is you want to Lord Castellan to give him +1 save and Mystic Shield, and then maybe translocate into a wild form charge with a battle mage. But the problem is you also want Gardas on top of that. So it's like 4 hero combo, which means you're going for more than 1 drop, which starts to look a little sketchy. Like, you could do more drops here. You could go 2 drop, add in a battle mage. Cut the Chariot, add in a Battle Mage and some Aether Wings, or even Terra Wings if you're feeling frisky. Actually, I don't think you can do that. It's too many allies.
I don't think it fits, yeah.
Yeah, but you could run Aether Wings here and just have more units on the board. I kind of like the Stormstrike Chariot supporting the Vindictors, right? That extra charge mortal wounds really helps their damage because they're not the highest damage unit. And yeah, it seems like this was kind of the evolution of where we started with, well, I want to drop 15 Vindictors into play. And it turns out we just said, well, it's actually better to just start them on the table, which is weird. It's a weird evolution of that thought process.
Yeah. Ironically, the Terra Wings do actually fit. It's exactly right. You've got 180 points to work with if you drop the Chariot.
The points work, but that's too many allies. Because remember, Battle Mage, Frostheart Phoenix, and Terra Wings are all allies. So you need to run 12 units.
Yep. Ouch.
Mm-hmm.
Lovely ally rules.
Oh, wait, no we don't, because it's Stormkeep. Yeah, it's Coalition, so you can totally do that.
Oh, they're Coalition! Yeah, it works out. The Terra Wings are the only allies.
Yeah.
It could work, and you could do it if you're okay with a 2-drop. If your meta seems like it's conducive to a 2-drop, I would run that combo. I think that would be
either Gur Battle Mage to get +2 to charge, so that after you translocate, they can actually charge into something and fight it and pin it down, or Hish Battle Mage just to make it even more durable and more annoying to deal with. Either one is fun. Don't know about Azurite Halo. I'm torn on that one, but we'll see. Also, Call for Aid.
It's
that might
actually fairly good because I really like it as a tool against something like, I don't know, pink horrors or even gits, like being able to do mortal wounds back to them, or anything that does like lots of like trash shooting, like Reavers. Like if you're in the middle with a bunch of Vindicators and Idoneth Reavers are shooting you, wow, they're dying in droves, and you're not taking like any damage comparatively.
Yeah, they want to unleash hell. Okay, take more damage than I will.
Yeah.
But it's also great on like just stick it on a chariot and throw the chariot at one of these high volume attackers, and chariot will probably survive honestly because the -1 hit, 3-up save, and if you get an all-out defense on it with another hero because it can't issue commands to itself. But if you can get it to survive, even more value the next turn.
Oh, I got to do that at LVO. It was disgusting.
It's great, yeah.
Absolutely disgusting.
But I think you take a strong position on one of the central objectives with the Vindictors. Drop the or translocate the Adjudicators behind them, and like you can't. The problem with this is like you can't spread your army too much because everything has to stay near Gardas. So it's not like you can. It's not like you can have the big castle set up like you could with Dracoth Blizzard, for example, which also uses a Phoenix, because the Phoenix would just fly up to meet wherever the rest of your units are. But this one, because you have a bunch of slow units that can't just drop out of the sky, you're kind of limited in where you can go. But I think we're seeing higher infantry counts. We're seeing lots more models on objectives. So I think the extra, like counting as 3 models on home objectives is going to be really good for Vindictors. Like, hopefully you match up against Gargants with this list. That would be like the best case scenario.
Yeah. Or like, I wouldn't mind going up against like Ironjaws probably doesn't switch their strategy. They're actually good with Ironjaws too against something like this.
Yeah, the Ironjaws taking damage when they charge you would be pretty nice. But then again, you'll probably fail the 3+, and then you'll probably roll a 1 on the D3, even if you do pass it. So, There you go. You guys want to try out our first, what I think is our first competitive Stormkeep list?
Maybe there's so many lists that we're doing here that are very good, and some we haven't gone over that are a little more interesting to me, that are pretty along this line of like something that no one would ever expect. But I could see myself running this if I go to enough events this year.
If you play against Gits, this is a good way to counter them, because Gits are so annoying with how many bodies they have and the fact that they can contest objectives from 9 inches away instead of 6 like everyone else. And this is like, no, stay in your place, learn your place, you little mongrels. Get back in your little hut of shame over there, your little shame cave. Like the real people are here playing this game, because yeah, it feels good to count as 3 models on an objective.
Yeah.
I will say Gits are, well, this can be edited out. Gits are fucking bonkers with their bounders, man. But they are swingy. Like, you need to get their buffs. They need to get their buffs into them to make them good. Put it in context. Full squad of bounders was able to clear out 2 sharks and my turtle in 1 combat. But another squad of bounders that wasn't buffed struggled to kill a battle mage over 2 turns.
Oh man, yeah. I've had a game where a battle mage survived on an objective against he got charged by 10 wardens from a Lumineth player, and the battle mage just tanked them the whole time. They just missed everything, and he was in cover. It was amazing. So off the concept of Frostwall, of dropping in Vindictors, and that eventually evolved into just like buffing up Vindictors, tossing them up into the middle of the board. This is kind of a natural evolution of that, which is same thing, but with 10 Protectors instead. So what this list is trying to do, it's trying to buff up 10 Protectors with +1 save through the Lord Castellant, and then the Lord Relictor translocates the 10 Protectors forward. The Lord Castellant hopefully runs 6 into range, because Tunnel Master is into range, that's why Tunnel Master is there. You give the Protectors Wild Form, hopefully you make the charge. If you don't, that's okay. It's actually not the end of the world if you miss the charge here, because what you're trying to do is set up a very powerful defensive position in the middle of the board, and if your opponent charges into that, your Lord Castellant can use the Quicksilver Draught to fight first, and since the 10 Protectors are in the Glacian Command Battalion with him, they fight at the same time. So you are looking to immediately fight with the Lord Castellant and 10 Protectors, and they can activate Unleash the Hatred to do a ridiculous amount of damage on that turn. So the positioning here is super finicky because the 10 Protectors have to be wholly within 6 inches of the Lord Castellant, and the Lord Castellant has to be within 3 inches of an enemy when they finish their charge. So you pretty much have to put him on the front line and put the Protectors sort of around him in a circle. But man, when you pull this off, it's brutal. And if your opponent doesn't charge into it, they've just given up the middle of the board. So it kind of feels like a no-win scenario for your opponent. Either they play into it and they take a lot of damage, probably unrecoverable damage, frankly, or they don't play into it and you've just won tactically, like zone control for the whole board, because the middle of the board is so key this season. That's the concept. To facilitate that, we've gone with 3-drop here, try to have as few drops as possible to try to win that first turn. Otherwise, you are trying to charge into your opponent with Translocate and Wild Form. So in the Battle Regiment, we've got a Lord Relictor with High Priest and Translocation. High Priest to make this combo as reliable as possible. We go with Gardas Steel Soul, who drops in after the Protectors to make sure that they don't just get overwhelmed with damage. The Battle Mage with Gur here gives them Wild Form, which is +2 run and charge, which is very handy after Translocating. You get a +2 charge, so 7-inch rerollable charge potentially. 2 units of Vanquishers, which if you are, you could go Warlord with this setup if you're okay with playing first or second. You can go for more value. You can take Warlord Battalion and then go for Call for Aid, and then you can revive these units of Vanquishers. I'm a big fan of reviving Vanquishers in Hallowed Knights because they die, they fight when they die, they explode with Blaze of Glory, and then you revive them on the other side of the map and steal an objective. It's a play I make all the time. It catches people off guard all the time. They always forget about it. And then it's rounded out with some speed, because if you notice, the movement in this list is like pathetic. it's like almost as slow as you can possibly be. So I decided to cram in 2 Stormstrike Chariots who can play flanking objectives and do supporting damage on the charge. And that's the list. I got some notes here. You can replace the Stormstrike Chariots with 2 Stormdrake Guard if you want to roar on there instead and you want some flying. There are downsides to this. What I like about having 2 Chariots as opposed to 1 unit of Stormdrakes is that 2 Chariots can be in 2 different places. So you can send one off to the left, one off to the right, or you can just cover a huge amount of space because they also have huge bases. And with Gardas, they're also really tanky. The 3-up save, 5-up ward on 12 wounds is durable. That's good. You can also replace the Battle Mage here with a Knight and Cantor, or you can replace one of the Chariots with 5 more Crossbow Judicators, bringing this up to a 15 Judicator squad, which is a truly disgusting amount of damage for shooting. If you do that, what you would do is you just drop the Protectors into the middle, don't even charge, just translocate up with all your buffs up, then drop 15 Judicators behind them and just blow everything up. In order to get to the Crossbow Judicators, you have to get past the Protectors, and you put the Chariots on the sides to protect the flanks from charges. And yeah, it just becomes a game of how fast can you kill the Protectors to get to those Judicators who will kill you.
Yeah, I think that's the way that I would personally play this list, is going for the 15 Judicator. It's pretty sweet. It does bring the list a lot leaner. And can you actually replace the Battle Mage in that Incanter here? Is it Knight Incanter 125?
No, 120. Nothing except Decimators.
Oh, that's right. They changed everything except Decimators. That's right. Oh man. But yeah, I think I would personally go for the 15 Judicators, and I would play this 100%. This is such a neat list, and I really like the Galatian Command combo with Castellan Protectors here.
Yeah, being able to fight, defensively at the bottom of a turn. Let's say if your opponent doubles you, like you take the top of the turn, you get all your buffs up, you stick your Protectors in, you might lose a couple by the time you get into round 2. But then when it's your turn, if your opponent didn't finish you off, and this is probably going to be the case because this block is so durable, then yeah, you just fight in the hero phase, and that it's really hard to recover from 10 Protectors fighting in the hero phase.
Oh yeah.
Especially after you've burned Quicksilver Draught to fight first defensively in their turn. Like you just have to dedicate so many resources to kill this Protector block. And if you don't do it, you've given up the board. So it's rough. Mm-hmm. This would even like clear out Squigs. Squigs charge into this. you just mutilate them. You fight first, right? So they don't get to do anything.
Yeah, this would take him out.
It's brutal. If you have protectors, if you like Judicators, this is a fun one to try. So Mrigank, this is your updated Annihilator Grande list, and it seems like you've soured a bit on the concept, but then maybe come around on it afterwards, based on the name of this one.
Sure. I mean, yeah. So I like Annihilators. This is not a secret to anyone on this channel.
No way.
However, we have taken a bit of a backseat. One of the things that we constantly mention Annihilators or Annihilator-based lists are not good at is dealing with either a critical mass of wounds or a critical mass of reinforcement. We actually really like it when people have like a lot of split different targets, or if we have lots of elite targets that we can just smash Annihilators into, because they trade really well. But if you're facing up like 10, 15 Chosen, or, you know, like a 10 Chaos Knight block with Mark and Nurgle, 36 Squig Herd with a bunch of all the other stuff Gits can bring with it, or even something like Tzeentch with Ping Cores, Annihilators just don't match up really well right now. And for this reason, I'm rating them a little bit lower this season. Obviously, that might change as the months go on. If they're, if the Lord Inheritance points came down by 40 and the Annihilators by 10 or 20, this list I think would be genuinely playable. It would open up a lot of like utility options you could take in this list. So the way this has changed from my previous iteration, well, actually no, let me go over the core. So the core is very much the same. You have the Lord Imperatant, you have 2 units of Annihilators, Meteoric Grandhammers, you have 2 Stormstrike Chariots. Chariots are excellent units always in this list. They give you good screens, they give you good melee. Bounty Hunters being gone sucks, but Chariots are just good damage, and they last a long time. Their defenses are still the same. The Lord Relictor, because you need lots of movement in this list, this is a list that likes to take objectives mid to late game, and Translocation really helps with that. Knight Incanter, because you have a billion drops and you always will. You don't want someone taking first turn and nuking your Lord Relictor with like an Umbral Spell Portal. Or if there's like a Tzeentch list which cuts out your damage, you really rely on your damage to kneecap your opponent. So being able to deny something like a 5-up ward is from Techless is pretty good.
Yeah, or just, stop the 10 block of Knights from getting Mystic Shield.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, that's perfect. Exactly. So the main change I made in this list is I used to have Vanquishers as the first drop in Bounty Hunters, but now that Bounty Hunters is gone, I'm not too hot on Vanquishers. Like, I really like Call for Aid, but Call for Aid just like for Vanquishers doesn't feel worth it in this list, because what's happening is Stormstrike Chariots are good enough screens, and you are mainly using your distance from your opponent to keep safe. So I don't rate Call for Aid that highly in this archetype again. And for that reason, I've opted to cut out a unit of Raptors and Vanquishers and have a reinforced block of Judicators with Bullstorm Crossbows instead. This gives us some range projection. Again, so at 18 inches against infantry units, we'll basically be safe. It allows us to deal with screens and gives us like tools against that mass level of critical wounds that I was talking about. So like if we're fighting like a reinforced block of Squig Herd or reinforced block of zombies, like Judicators, Bullstorm Crossbows do work against that. Obviously, then we have at least 3 Vanguard Raptors, because I think being able to snipe key heroes like a Sorcerer Lord or like a Lord Castellan or like the Squig Boss for 80 points that Gits get, I think is really important. Aether Wings to support that, and also go in the Galatian Sharpshooters Battalion with them. And instead of Horrorghast, which you do not have the points for, I opted for Geminids of Ulgish, and this is mainly as a counter to armor. Although we have a good amount of shooting in this list, Judicators with Bullstorm Crossbows typically don't do well against anyone who has a 3-up armor save, who then all-out defense to a 2-up armor save. So in order to counteract that, casting Geminids through your Knight Incanter, who's almost always like forward deployed to deny a key spell the first couple of turns, is pretty key. And yeah, it's 2,000 points, not going to get a triumph, still pretty low wounds, low models, but I think you can do work against some lists, but then there's some critical wound lists that I think will just win against you because you just have too much to chew through, because this list does not have any like staying power. It wants to kill what it wants to kill every turn. And yeah, I think if the points came down on Annihilators, or at least the Lord Imperatant by a good bit, I think this list would be playable again. Like if I had a slot for like a Terror Wing, I think I would really appreciate it in this list.
Or maybe like some Prosecutors to absorb Unleash Hell. Yeah, it feels like this list is like 100 points short of being good again.
Yeah, I want like 100 points. I wouldn't even mind cutting down the Lord Relictor to like a Lord Raritant with High Priest or something, So, yeah.
Yeah, so for people who are unfamiliar with this archetype, because frankly, it doesn't see a lot of play, I think like we're pretty much the only ones that play it. Anybody when other people, like other websites and channels, review our Grandhammer list, they're like, what the hell are these guys doing? What does this list do? I don't understand. But like, we understand it, and it's tough to think about like somebody watching this who won't understand it.
I've debated, like, now that the season is over and it doesn't matter, and I've done playing this list to get my ITC spot or whatever. I thought about doing a video explaining how this list is played and like the amount of things you have to think about, because there are a lot. It's not an easy list to play. And if you look at the radar chart we have on the right, I've rated this a 5 in complexity. You make a mistake, you get punished. You don't account for the double turn, you get punished. You need to know what to hit with your shooting and your melee every turn. This is not a list that you can just flap about with, and it's just really, really difficult.
Yeah, I think.
Plus, obviously, you could fail the 7-inch charge. That's always
that's always the worst. Yeah, the radar chart kind of tells the whole story here, right? It's not a fast list. It's not a good magic list. The melee and shooting are about average for Stormcast. Poor defense, low model count. So how is this list taking you to such a high ranking in ITC? It's because it does pinpoint precision damage where you need it, right? And it basically plays like I would say it's almost like a Lumineth style list or like a Zinch style list, right? Like, it's very meticulous, and you have to fully understand everything your opponent's capable of doing and assess the situation and make the right decision. And there's still dice rolls involved in that whole process, right? So it's I don't recommend this for beginners at all, which really sucks, because I'm sure a lot of people are getting into Stormcast using the new Christmas box and Dominion, and they have Annihilators and a Lord Imperatant they want to use. I'm telling you guys, those are like the hardest units to use in this army, because there's so many things that can go wrong. That if you want to play tournaments with Annihilators, I would advise against it. Start with something simpler, like our starter competitive list. That's a lot easier to get your mind around. Age of Sigmar is a complicated game. You don't need a super complicated list to learn the game with.
Yeah, and the main thing, the reason I'll tell you guys why I was playing this list: A, I didn't want to play Dragons for a year because everyone else was. B, I really like the idea of being able to do pinpoint strikes all the way across the board, but at the same time not have the rest of my army be at risk. Like, if I'm using Fulminators or any other hammer unit like Storm Drakes, I have to commit myself to a board position and then strike from that board position. And this list can be everywhere and nowhere at once. And that's what's so awesome about it.
Yeah, when we first pitched the idea for this one, oh God, it feels like a long time ago. It's like a year and a half ago. We were just kind of chilling in Discord, and I was like, what if we had like a sniper's tower that's just calling in air support of Grandhammers coming in and just dropping bombs on people? And that's exactly what you do with this list. You sit super far back, your long strikes just blow stuff up, while you drop Grandhammers in to delete key targets every turn. It feels great until you miss the 7-inch charge. Then it feels awful. Then it's the worst.
I only missed one at LVO, so I'm still good on my record. So that's not a problem for me.
And man, going out on top is the good way to do it, right? You've siphoned all the luck. You're about to hit that other end of the bell curve distribution. So
I know.
Quite while you're ahead. This here is an update for Hallowstrike. Hallowstrike is typically defined by having a Stormcast castle list that uses Longstrike Raptors, Guardis to protect everything, and then your choice of hammer unit, either 4 Fulminators, or you could potentially use 10 Retributors, you could use 10 Protectors, could use 2 squads of 3 Dracolines, so take your pick on hammer units, but the core of this list is Guardis protecting everything, and then Vanguard Raptors to force the enemy to come to you. So this is... I think it's my favorite Stormcast castle list. It's the classic. It gives you the most tactical options. You can play, you can leverage your defenses. So unlike something like an Annihilator list, you can actually take a hit and survive it, and then be able to riposte and counterattack right away, because everything's on the table, potentially, if you want it to be. Season 2 updates give us the Sharpshooters Battalion, which will allow us to kill heroes. And I think that's going to really, really, really help in some matchups. Like, if you're playing Fyreslayers and you can't shoot the Battlesmith, you're going to lose. Almost certainly. That's such a hard matchup if you can't shoot the Battlesmith. There's what else is there to say about Hallowstrike? I've been playing it for so long that I feel like I've said everything I need to in previous podcast episodes.
Yeah, it's just a very methodical playstyle, and I think it's a little underappreciated.
It gets a little boring. Just because it kind of just does the same. It kind of does the same thing every time. It deploys far back in a castle.
It's really good at it though, right? Like that's the whole,
Yeah, it is really good at it. I also really like having a lot of drops. A lot of people are high on taking as few drops as possible right now with 1 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop are pretty common. I just like having 12, 13, sometimes 15 drops, as many as I can have, because I want to be able to play against any list and have the perfect deployment for my Longstrike crossbow so they can Thunderbolt Volley turn 1. So I can put my Incantor down within unbinding range of the spell that I want to stop. So I can put my Knight Relictor and Lord Castellan out of range of their sharpshooters. So I know exactly how far up the table I can put my Fulminators to kind of leverage their 10-inch move because it's pretty slow. Stuff like that. I really like having a lot of drops. And with a list like this, where you can play far back, you don't care if you go first or second. You can play either way. They make you take the top of one. Great. You shoot some stuff with your long strikes. You commit a minimal amount of resources to score, max score. And then you just wait for the double, because this list can handle most enemy double turns between the Knight Incantor and Gardas Aura.
Yeah.
Reason why we rated Evocators on foot as well as we did is I'm calling it Evostrike because it kind of harkens back to the Anvil Strike list that we played in 2nd edition, which was about using 9 double-tapping long strike raptors and then a block of 10 Evocators on foot as the main hammer. That's pretty much what this list is trying to do. It feels like a revival of that concept. So this does play similar to Hallowstrike, which uses like a castle setup. But unlike that list, which is trying to be very defensive and absorb charges, this one is just trading stuff. Like, everything dies. Your hammer units will die when they get targeted. And I think you just got to accept that. And if you're not investing points in like a Lord Castellan and Mystic Shield, like if you just don't care about these things, I think it gives you options that you wouldn't have otherwise. And some of those options are things like a big old block of 10 Evocators on Lauchon, surfing up the board, and then getting like a 4-inch or a 5-inch charge. No, it'll be a 4-inch because they move 5, right? I've always liked this style. So this is very similar to like the Hallowstrike list we talked about, similar to the 9L list we talked about, but this one specifically uses Evocators, and I think Evocators are just a great unit right now. Their damage output is insane. The first time you get a Lightning Arc with 10 models, you will be addicted to their damage output, because blasting something for like, you spike high and you just do 15 mortal wounds. Like, oh my god, it feels so good. Definitely give it a try. If you just started playing Age of Sigmar in 3rd edition and you've never seen what 10 Evocators on foot can do, you got to see it for yourself. It's a thing of beauty.
Oh yeah, this is the OG, but updated.
Yeah, this is the 2nd edition list that you and I played. Brought up to Season 2 now that they can fight in 2 ranks. And that's always what we said was the problem with Evocators on foot, was that their 1-inch range restricted them. Because for Lightning Arc to be good, you need 10 models. Or 15, but probably 10, right? 10's ideal, because you can't get 15 right now, because you can't double reinforce. But the only way when you get 10 models, 1-inch range means you're just missing out on their regular attacks. And that just feels awful. But now, Season 2 gives us Galatian Veterans, which allows us to bring this unit back up to exactly how good it was in 2nd edition. And when we say things are 2nd edition good, that means a lot, because everything was way more broken in 2nd edition than it is now. So this is like a blast from the past.
Honestly, why'd they take away 2-inch reach?
Ridiculous.
Didn't even make them battle line.
Well, they got these big staves, and if a staff is defined by anything, it's the fact that you actually have to hit somebody with the bottom of it right in front of you. You have to hold it over your head and just club people with the bottom of the haft. So that makes sense why they have 1-inch range.
Can't wait till Annihilators lose that and they give it to whatever the next unit is.
Whatever the next unit is. Best Annihilators,
Now, I also want to mention here, this list has 20 points left over. You don't really need a Triumph here. Longstrike's already wound on 2s. Evocators and Dracolines can get to wound on 2s. So you could spend those 10 extra points swapping out the Battle Mage for another Incantor, or upgrading your Vanquishers into Sequitors. I think that might actually be a valid pick. You could also take the Bloodthirsty Triumph to save yourself a command point to reroll charges on the Evocators. All sorts of little tweaks you can do for this one. If you have these models laying
God, I
around,
missed the Night Heralder.
man, me too. But so one thing you can
That
do
ability
here,
was so like to run in charge and like being able to like blow like Sylvan to pieces.
yeah. Well, we have Steadfast March. That's an option in this list, actually, because after the Evocators get off the boat, you could Steadfast March them with Wild Form, potentially, for +2 run and +2 charge, and then have, like, a 3-inch charge guaranteed, even if they re-deploy, because you'll have +2 to run, +2 charge.
Wild Form is +2 run.
Yep. Almost never comes up.
Yep, for us anyway.
And I've been threatening for a long time, every time they nerf our shooting, with volley or point changes or anything, I say, you know what? I'm just going to double down. I'm going to bring more long strikes. I'm not going to stop at 6. You can't stop me from bringing more. And this list is the result of that. And I think it actually is going to work because it basically just plays like a standard Stormcast castle with a Relictor, Battle Mage, and Incanter supporting. But then it has both Fulminators and Dracolines so that it can split its threats across the table. It doesn't have like a super melee hammer. But when you have 9 long strikes shooting every single turn, I don't think you need a super melee hammer. You just need to trade efficiently with your melee pieces and your fast pieces. And I think this list has the legs to actually be good.
Ooh, I like this list.
Right?
Yeah,
It's
this
kind
is
of interesting.
Yeah,
It
the
spreads
Terror
out.
Wings and everything. Oh my god.
Yeah, so Terror Wings are really, really good. We've been talking about them on our Discord server. If you're unfamiliar, they have an ability in the shooting phase. You roll 2 dice over a unit's bravery, and if you beat their bravery, they can't get commands for the rest of the turn. And it's the shooting phase, which means my turn, my shooting phase, your turn, your shooting phase, both players' shooting phases. This thing just disables commands on a unit. Now, right now, I think it's like the best time ever to use them because there's so much like Bravery 6, Bravery 7 stuff in the game. As soon as they release more Death Armies, they're going to get worse, but this is the time to use them right now. So if you haven't picked up a box from that Warcry set that came out, definitely consider it. They're a very good ally.
Like, Lumineth and Gits are what's making their rounds right now. Oh my god, dude. Or Ogres even. All of them have like 6 bravery or lower.
Well, I mean, Swig herds don't really care, but yeah.
Well, Bounders certainly do.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say you play against Lumineth, or not Lumineth, Daughters of Cain, they're melee snakes. They're trying to run in charge with the Melusai, and in the shooting phase, you disable commands on that unit, so it can't run in charge anymore. so it's just done. It ran. It can't charge anymore. Sorry. So yeah, tons and tons of shooting. This is not trying to have super defense, right? This list will lose the Fulminators. It will lose the Evocators after they do their thing. Those pieces are meant to be used to secure an objective, buy you time for your long strikes to keep shooting, and they have the speed to get to objectives, along with a Relictor like translocating a bunch of stuff around.
Yeah, some pressure.
Yeah, this is a lot closer to how we played in 2nd edition, right? Everything is disposable once it gets hit, or it's gonna die. Whatever, can't really stop it. But it's got the shooting power to just take care of business. I think you might like this one.
Yeah, I do have 9 long strikes from our Anvil Strike days. So yeah.
So Great Hunt is a lot of people call this a shoot cast type list. That's kind of the name that's been around for it. I've been calling it Great Hunt because I just like the idea of a whole lot of shooting in a Stormcast list. It feels like you're taking down key targets. The core of the list is a Lord Arcanum on Toralon, who's going to be giving a whole bunch of different units +1 hit. In this list, you're going to be giving +1 hit to a Knight Judicator, Judicators with Boltstorm crossbows, Vanquishers, Dracolines, Chariot, and 4 Tempesters. To support that, you've got some faster units to make sure you're not too slow. But this is basically a Stormcast castle. That's fun to say. But it's heavily leaning towards shooting rather than the melee counterpunch. It still has that nice little 3 Evocator squad that I like putting in lists these days. It's got 2 squads of Vanquishers for Call for Aid. It's got a 5-man squad of Judicators for Thunderbolt Volley. There's all sorts of ways to build out this list. The way I like doing this list the best, I think, is with 4 Tempesters. I think a block of 4 of those guys to act as an anvil. If you give them Mystic Shield, then you can stick them in the middle of the board and kind of leverage their defenses while the rest of your shooting kind of does its thing. So this, kind of like your Annihilator list, Mrigank, this one's tougher to play. Like, I give it a complexity 5 because it's not obvious when you need to commit your resources and how. There's a lot of failure points because it is relying on spells with no bonuses to cast, which really sucks. And a lot of your units are they're just going to die as soon as they get hit. The only somewhat durable ones are like the Chariot and the Tempesters, and you have to know which targets they can take. So this is very much a list about baiting traps, allowing the enemy to come in and then closing it on them, right? You give them 5 Vanquishers to charge, and then you shoot whatever charge them. That's kind of how this list plays, and it tries not to fall too far behind on objectives. Previous versions of this list had, I think at one point there were 5 Knight Judicators in a single list, and I stand by that. I think that can still work. Knight Judicators create their own screens, they have high rent shooting, but in this season...
Yeah, because they can't shoot heroes anymore.
Yeah.
You used to just take out people's heroes turn 1 with that list.
Yeah, and that was what made this list super fun, was you had 4, I think I ran it with 4 Knight Judicators at the end, all of them out hitting on 2s and 2s, rend 3 damage apiece. So you just snipe out all the heroes turn 1. Now you can't do that this season. So I'm not terribly enthused about the idea of running multiple Judicators, Knight Judicators, but I think you can pivot into lots of other good units that Stormcast have. I'm not sure how far you can pivot until you kind of get away from that initial concept, but I think this is still pretty much a shoot cast list with... Like, you don't want to just drop all the melee entirely, so it's still got some of that in there. Torlon is great, though, I have to say. We may have underrated it in our tier list. I would like it to be cheaper, a little bit cheaper still.
It's hitting a like a ceiling, or I don't even know, a floor on how cheap it can be, though. Like, it's starting to get up there or down there.
I think the absolute lowest it can go is like 220. I don't think it can ever get lower than that. But right now it costs more than 2 Knight Incantors. So that's kind of stings, right? Like, because I could just have 2 more Dispel Scrolls in here. I still might do that. I could have a Lord Relictor and a Battle Mage in here. There's a lot of other things you could take instead. But the ability to give +1 hit to everything, depending on how you play this. Personally, I play this as a pulse. I've seen people play it as an aura, which could make it stronger, even. Like, if Comet Trail is an aura, then you can drop units into play next to the Torlon, so I don't necessarily agree with that ruling.
Need a consistent,
yeah,
ruling from GW, specifically.
Oh, that sure would be nice, but I don't think we're going to get that.
Well,
We'll get a new book soon, don't worry.
Yeah, new book. 3 points.
Only 1 more year.
Yeah, new book next year. That'll be the FAQ. So I went Astral Templars here. You could pick any subfaction, right? This is completely subfaction agnostic. If you want more melee punch, you can go Celestial Vindicators. If you want 6-up ward and Battle Line Tempesters for key to victory, you could go Hammers of Sigmar. Any of the Stormhosts work. There could even be an argument for Celestial Warbringers to reroll on the Knight Judicator. Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this. Would you ever make a Stormkeep list with this using a free guild general and maybe like 20 or 30 human crossbows? I know like it's not a good time to buy City of Sigmar units right now because Dawnbringers is probably later this year, but do you think that could work?
Personally, I wouldn't, just because I don't own Cities units. So I don't think I can envision what that would play like necessarily. But I like Scions of the Storm way too much. Being able to just drop 5 Judicators into play when you need to shoot something, or the 4 Tempesters, right? If you're not worried about buffing them up defensively, you can just drop them into play, and then they're exactly where they need to be, 12 inches away, to shoot stuff immediately. I like Scions of the Storm just too much. I think if you're not using a lot of Redeemers, you should go Scions of the Storm instead of Stormkeep. But maybe when the Dawnbringers book comes out, being able to coalition and pick up any number of Dawnbringer units in our armies, that's great. Like, being able to go over the 400 point cap seems really, really useful potentially, because there's a lot of Stormcast units that are junk that we could replace with new fancy units that have good rules.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about my current favorite list, because it's just so stupid. This is what I've been pushing this since the book first came out, but the points just weren't quite there. But I think they're finally there now after 20 months or however long it's been since the book came out. This is a list called Saint Karazai. We showed this for the first time on Warhammer Weekly, if you recall, Mrigank. And it's all about Karazai. We stick him with a pet Gardas to give him a 5-up ward. We give him False Protection from the Battle Mage for -1 hit. We give him a Lord Castellan for +1 save. We give him Mystic Shield for another +1 save. And then we bring, and here's the hidden spice that you guys disagreed with me in the tier list, but I think you're coming around on it. The Drakesworn Templar is your general. And he takes Master of the Celestial Menagerie to give himself and Karazai -1 to be wounded. Light of the Young Stars so that you can roar and give something -1 hit in the same turn. And he takes the Quicksilver Draft so that he can fight first and potentially do some crazy stuff. And then here, you've got 20 points left over, so you can swap the Battle Mage with the Knight and Cantor. Pros and cons to that. But basically what this list is trying to do is just push Karazai up the middle of the board with every single buff in the game and tank as much stuff as possible and never die in melee combat and just win the game because your opponent has thrown everything into Karazai and bounced off you. So Karazai will have -1 attack. So if your opponent has 15 models with 2 or 3 attacks apiece, well, now they're 1 or 2 attacks apiece. it's so oppressively strong. Then you have -1 hit, -1 wound, and you'll always be at +2 save, sometimes +3, sometimes +4. So unless they're Rend 4, you're going to be on a 2+ save. And then against Mortal Wounds, you've got Gardas, hopefully nearby, who is giving you a 5-up ward. So Karazai is effectively 27 wounds. That's a lot of Mortal Wounds you have to do in one turn. Gardas also gives both Karazai and the Drakesworn Templar once per game +1 attack to all of their melee profiles. And when you charge Karazai in with 7 attacks on 2s and 1s, Rend 3 damage, like, that just murders things. Not like, he actually does really good damage. Not like 4 Fulminator levels of damage, or even, I'd say it's comparable to like 4 Stormdrakes, but it's more reliable in my experience, just because the Rend 3 cuts through armor so well. So
also because he natively wounds on 2s, which is pretty good. Yeah,
well, with one of his attacks. With the other ones, you gotta, yeah. But when you find a Stour, you actually benefit from the +1 save and the +1 to wound. So like that turn there, after you stick him in the middle of the board, you find a Stour on your opponent's turn, everything charges him, hopefully, because he's got such a huge base, it's not like you can just go around him. He just chokes the board. And I've had a few games now, and every one of them ends the same way, where I get every buff in the world on Karazai, he marches up the middle of the board, and my opponent can't deal with him, and they can't maneuver around him. It's great. I can't think of many changes that I would make to this list, and I think I would actually recommend people try this in tournaments. I think it's super fun, and it's going to catch a lot of people off guard.
It's funny that we mentioned Warhammer Weekly, because I think Tyler Emerson is actually all hot on Karazai right now. That's all he's trying.
Great, yeah.
He hasn't come upon the Drakesworn Templar spice yet. So.
Oh, that's the first thing I figured out, and then the rest of the list just kind of formed around that.
Yeah, I think the Drakesworn Templar, this puts him, like, I think we put him just above the Star Drake, and it's literally because he has a niche. The Star Drake doesn't seem to have like a real.
I'm guessing you gave the Drakesworn Templar the axe of no pylon, or one inch pylon.
I've been primarily using the Arc Hammer just for more damage output. The no pylon thing is good too. Either option is fine, yeah. Mm-hmm. But the Star Drake does so much here. He's got 30-inch shooting that's Rend 3. Everybody forgets how useful that is, right?
Yeah, he's got an Adjudicator in his mouth.
Yeah, a little bit better than an Adjudicator, right? Which is nice.
Yeah, just a little bit, yeah.
Yep. And he's got a +1 cast aura on your turn to make your spells more reliable, which is a big problem Stormcast always have. And then if enemy wizards get in range, like if the Star Drake charges into a bunch of Lumineth, their entire army is -1 cast now, which is dope. that's really good. And since the Drakesworn,
he does have that aura.
Since the Drakesworn's not the primary target, like if they spend time killing the Drakesworn Templar, Karazai is going to murder everything the next turn. So they're not putting shots onto the Templar, and the whole time you're just reducing their efficiency. If they're not running a techless list, you're going to do just fine, I think, against Lumineth with this list. They don't have enough shots to kill Karazai. And the last thing the Drakesworn does is he eats things instantly. This is more relevant now than ever. I have every single game I played with this list, there's always been some awesome model that I can gobble up. Either a support hero that's been 4 or 5 wounds, or sometimes you just get lucky and you eat 2 of 6 Gore-gruntas. And Quicksilver Draft enables that, because the eating you do is after you pile in, but before you attack. So you can, using Quicksilver Draft, before anything fights, before anything gets any commands, just eat something. And then
Keep the leader model, and then if there are no heroes nearby, no commands for them.
Yeah. Oh, break cohesion. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with the Quicksilver Draft. I'm really, really liking it. Another option here you could do is the Mirror Shield on him. That way he can't be shot, and he can just harass shooting armies all day long in the middle of the field until they get within 9 inches. They just can't shoot him. You could also just drop that second artifact altogether and go for a 2-drop list, sticking more of this stuff in another battle regiment. That's another option. 2 drops does let you outdrop things like ogres, which is actually a really big thing for this matchup. So there's a lot of options here. I really do think it has tournament potential. I think it recently went 4-1 at a 50-person event.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Joel McGrath plays it a lot too. Joel's a really good player.
Yeah, Joel's
out in Australia.
Yeah, long-time watcher of our podcast, I hear.
He is?
Yeah, remember really? when we first started off, he was commenting on a lot of our stuff.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Cool.
So yeah, Drakesworn Templar. He is good. Good somewhat. Maybe in this list. But Karazai is definitely good. He's an interesting piece to think about, because he's somewhere between having 4 Fulminators or having 4 Stormdrakes, like in terms of points. In terms of like space taken up on board, he's closer to the 4 Fulminators. Like the 4 Drakes can take up way more space, but there's just so many little things he does that other hammer units don't do. Right? He can Finest Hour, that's awesome. He can Heroic Recovery to heal D3, which is great. He has a 14-inch flying move instead of a 12-inch, like the Stormdrakes, or a 10-inch like Fulminators. So he's just that little bit faster, which is it's like having a +2 charge on him. Huge base.
I mean, for those of us thinking that full Fulminators do more damage, think about it this way: you need to do 18 wounds to him to remove his damage potential. Fulminators will lose their damage potential as they take wounds in multiples of 6.
Yeah. It's also the problem that you can kind of pile in lots and lots of damage and just wipe out Fulminators. And we're trying really hard as Stormcast to keep our hammer units alive right now. Like, we're bringing Lord Castellan, and we're bringing Gardas, we're bringing all these things to keep those units alive. Karazai is just immortal, I feel like. I haven't seen him die in melee yet. The only things that ever kill him are like mass spell mortal wounds. And that's why I suggest maybe putting in a Knight Incantor instead of the Battle Mage. Up next, we have an Idoneth Deepkin list from James. James has been playing a lot of Idoneth lately, and you and I have been talking about this a lot, off the channel. And it seems like Idoneth are pivoting into a Thrall Reaver infantry-based style, especially using the powerful revive ability from Mor'phann, which, frankly, when we first looked at it, it was a different game. Damage was a lot higher. It seems like you can actually create like a grindy style based on how the objectives are set up and how combats are going. And this seems more viable now. So James, run us through it. What exactly is Slippery Thralls trying to do?
Well, it's trying to make it Mor'phann time for sure. So we're trying to minimize drops at the get-go, because the theme we've been getting at here is that you want to control your drops to get that first turn more often than not. Now, the reason why that's critical in this list is because you need to get your buffs off. Deployment in this list is you're usually starting out as a castle just around your boat. And you want to see if you can get the Foz protection to get a -1 hit or hit buff on your Thralls. And
well, sorry to because for people who may not be familiar, why exactly do you want to deploy around the boat? What defensive advantage does that give you?
The defensive advantage around the boat is that you get the 5-up ward on any Idoneth unit that has that's on foot. No matter.
Sweet. So your big block of 20 Thralls there, that's going to have a 5-up ward on deployment, and there's nothing your opponent can do to stop that.
Yep. Now, out the gate, you wonder 5-up or Thralls, 5-up save, 1 wound. They don't seem that durable. But turn 1, everything has cover, so you're going to get that +1 save out the gate right away. Couple that with the turtle being wholly within 15 of it, you're getting another +1 save. Couple that with a potential Mystic Shield, you're getting another +1 save. Couple that with Faw's Protection, that's -1 to hit. Couple that with Thrall Master, that's -1 to wound. You're basically guaranteeing that you protect against like an Hallowstrike army coming into your face there.
Yeah, that's going to be 20 wounds with -1 hit, -1 wound, 5 up ward, and like +4 to save. And that's before you get the Mystic Shield, because you can all out defense too, right? Like, it's so crazy.
Yep. Oh, and the best part about this is that you've got multiple units, obviously outside of the 20 squad of Thralls there. But the Thrall Master having leadership of the Alpha is able to issue all defense to 3 units. So that just furthers your safe stacking capabilities across the board.
Sweet.
Yeah. Let's talk about what's actually in the list. So Mor'phann builds are always going to have the Soul Render. If you don't have a Soul Render, you shouldn't be playing Mor'phann. It's going to guarantee that you're going to get 4 to 6 Thralls back, because you are going to lose Thralls inevitably.
Yeah. So again, for people who don't know what a Soul Render does and why he's so important to this subfaction, run us through that.
Yeah, so in the Battle Shock phase, Soul Render can, on its own, brings back D3 Namarti units. You can't stack that with multiple Soul Render, so it's limited to 1 Soul Render using the Lure Light on 1 unit, or multiple Soul Renders using it in multiple units. Point is, 1 unit can't benefit from once. But in Mor'phann, you just add a flat 3 to the amount that comes back. So rather than being 1 to 3 Thralls or Reavers coming back, you're getting 4 to 6.
Yeah, and that's every Battle Shock phase, like your Night Haunt.
Yes, exactly.
Really good.
Yep. There was a case at a tournament I was at this weekend where I was playing up against Gargants. He charged the Gatebreaker into my Thrall wall, left it with 2 Thralls, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're in the Battle Shock phase. Oh, cool, I've got 8 Thralls into you now. And then another squad of Thralls charging into you as well.
Well, I just wanted to ask what Lotan does for you here, because he's kind of really subtle in how good he is, but he's so good.
So at this point, you've been thinking of it as sort of like a defensive castle list. You're really hunkering down, and that's going to put you at a disadvantage to just stay where you are and not really spread out. The nice thing about Lotan is, well, the main thing about Lotan is that he gives a +1 to wound or wholly within 12 of them. But in addition to that, he has a once per battle ability that allows you to pop off one of the Itchen rituals in the game in any phase of the tide. So, for those who are familiar with the Itchen rituals, I had enough Deepkin players can call out a certain call it a boon at the start of the game that would affect during the one of the phases of the tide.
Right.
So for low tide, for instance, you'd have you're only visible within 12 inches of enemy units. And during high tide, all your Namarti units have a 5-up board, in addition to the normal things like fighting first or having cover across the board.
Right, so you could use Lotan to get a second turn of not being able to get seen at some point. You could also use him to get a second turn of a 5-up ward on your Thralls. So what I'm envisioning here is you start the game with a 5-up ward because you're around your boat. Round 2, you pop off the 5-up ward to let you move out and get into position, and then and you keep the 5-up ward because you pretend it's high tide with Lotan. And then round 3, it's high tide, so you have a 5-up ward again. So you're just the first 3 rounds of the game, all of your units pretty much have a 5-up ward, which is pretty dang good for a bunch of frail elves.
Yeah, I think you're starting to see like the hidden like new sort of nuances in this list. Like it's the complexity rating is correct, because even with myself, like there was a lot of times during the tournament there that I was like sort of scratching my head. It's like, did I do this right? Am I really sure I have this much safe stacking? No, yeah, I got this much safe stacking.
A lot of people underestimated the complexity of Idoneth. They thought it was going to be an Iron Jaws of order list.
Yeah,
and that's just not what they are.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly make those lists, but they're not going to be effective in that way.
That's probably why they keep overcosting eels.
Yeah.
They don't want it to be the Iron Jaws of order.
Yeah.
Order Jaws.
Order Jaws.
So let's talk about the Allopexes here, because instead of bringing Allopexes, you could have brought more Namarti Reavers, right? That could have been an option. So why did you opt for 2 Allopexes instead?
So my original draft of this list actually had 30 Reavers in it, and Paul and I have play tested with this prior. The problem is when you have that much foot infantry, it's a really slow list to break out. The Alapexes, I did keep 10 Reavers just as like a baseline for my shooting damage. And then I brought in the Alapexes to sort of make up for, or try to make up as much as I could for the loss of the 20 Reavers in the fact that they can swing high up in the damage. The big thing with the Alapexes is that I get that mobility back. 14-inch move is huge for them.
Yeah, speed is really, really important in castle builds. We talk about this all the time on the podcast. That anytime you make a castle, one of the flaws of a castle is like, yes, you get this really good defensive position, and your opponent attacks into you with, let's say, best case scenario, half their army, right? Because there's just limited space to fight. So you take on half their army using your full army, and that's really good. That's a favorable defensive position to fight in. However, until you kill your opponent, you're kind of stuck in your base, and then if you're using 5-inch, 6-inch move units, it's really, really hard to get onto the objectives after that engagement is finished. And that's where fast units come in, especially fast flying units. That's where they come in. Really, really useful to just jump over the enemy and be like, hey, I'm on this objective now. It's really good. And they shoot while they're doing it. They're so good.
Yeah, so I'll jump a little bit forward over to the Leviathan then, just because the Leviathan shoots just as well as 2 sharks do. So at this rate, the shooting power I have is effective of that of 4 sharks now. Leviathan has the reverberating carapace, just so that way I get the extended aura range on the +1 save and the +1 to hit for Namarti units. So that brings my Thralls now up, when they're near they're near an enemy unit that's within range of the turtle to a 2-up on the attack.
Spooky.
Yep.
Potentially exploding 6s too if you get the Thrall Master going.
Yeah, exploding 6s or rerolling 1s, whatever is your fancy.
Yeah, that's scary. When you're fighting Gargants and 20 Thralls and you're rerolling 1s on those attacks, oh man, you just chop them to bits.
Yeah. Yeah, we got the 10 Reavers, which are a standard staple. The nice thing about them is the Unleash Hell when they're by the turtle. They have a built-in on their War Scroll, if they're shooting or if they're attacking something that's within 9 inches of them, they get a +1 to hit. So on the Unleash Hell, that negates that Unleash Hell penalty, and then they get a +1 to hit from the turtle at that point.
Unleashing on 2s. Oh boy.
Yep.
Even with just 10 Reavers, it's not like you can't just like throw Aether Wings into them and hope to tie them down. Which I noticed you have a unit of Aether Wings in here, so you want to talk about that inclusion?
Yeah, so realistically, the secret sauce in this list is in the allies. The Aether Wings, they were kind of just a last-minute thought. I was at 1930 points and I had 70 points left over. I'm just thinking to myself, more mobility doesn't hurt. I'll just get the Aether Wings. And then I realized after my tournament, I read the Forgotten Nightmares rule, and it actually says that specifically an enemy unit or an enemy cannot target an IDF unit unless it's unless that IDF unit is the closest eligible target. So if I just park my Aether Wings closest to the shooting unit, they have to waste their time shooting at it.
Yeah, and in that case, 6 wounds with no save suddenly is a lot of wounds. Like, it's a lot of effective damage mitigation. It's really good. And just having a fast flying unit, like with the Sharks, having a second fast flying unit that can go symmetrically the opposite direction, and just contest other objectives. Really, really useful for a castle setup.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this is something that's underappreciated in Idoneth, that Idoneth are actually run fairly elite. Like, you don't really have as much like just screening power, like cheap screening, like you can get with Aether Wings here. And those Aether Wings become much more valuable when you can effectively screen shooting.
Yeah. That's what I enjoyed a lot about my game against Skaven. It was a situation where I was allowed to move up because the Skaven player wasn't really going to take the time to spread himself out too far because he wanted to hunker down. And that's fine. You have the 3 Warp Lightning cannons, but I'm going to dictate where you're going to shoot those cannons now.
Yep.
That is such a powerful feeling to have behind the table, frankly.
Oh, the chaff is really good. Fast flying chaff is especially good. This is why Prosecutors, despite being like a completely useless unit that does no damage, is still a C-tier Stormcast unit, because just the ability to fly and charge 3d6 is so useful tactically. Really wish Stormcast list had like another 100 points. I would slam Prosecutors in everything. It would be amazing. I got 2 more questions for you about this list. Why Steed of Tides? I know that we talked about something, but I think it's cool, and I think you should talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah, so let's jump into the Thrallmaster here, because he's got quite a bit going on for him.
Yeah.
The Thrallmaster has been selected as my general, one, because he's probably the most effective and cheap general choice in this list. Like I said, he's doing the -1 to wound, or one of the other 2 auras. But Lord of the sea, Storm and Sea is what really brings this list together in terms of durability. I just ignore Battle Shock tests wholly within 12 of the general at that point. So when I lose 18 of my 20 Thralls, guess what? I don't care.
They always get a chance to revive, which is a big deal.
Yep. And on top of that, I can just park the Thrallmaster in the boat now, and now his aura is huge for that.
Yeah, and that also comes in handy with the Glacian Command Battalion there, because if a Thrallmaster is inside the boat, then having a unit within 3 inches and having your Thralls wholly within 6 inches of that boat is a lot easier than this tiny little 32 mil base. So if somebody charges into your boat setup there, not only do you get to have super durability that turn, defense, like passive super durability pretty much, but you also, when it's your turn, like let's say you're going second, if you got outdropped, you just get to fight in hero phase with 20 Thralls that just got a D3+3 revival the previous turn.
Yeah, and I find leaning into something like that earlier on in the season is going to be powerful, because right now I'm just seeing a lot of people play with the battle regiment, and they're not really, like, elite armies are going to bring the Galatian Command from what I'm predicting right now. But it's really situational when that hero phase fight comes up.
Oh, when it comes up, it's going to be huge. I think people are going to see the value of that, plus the battle tactic that it unlocks. And then sharpshooters, I think, is going to take off later in the season as well. I think people are sleeping on sharpshooters, but the number of armies right now that, like, if you could shoot this hero, the game is way easier. Like, if I could shoot the Thrallmaster here, this matchup becomes a lot easier. Yeah. Obviously, I can't because, Idoneth's still doing Idoneth things. But, like, let's say I translocate, I get the right angle, and then I can shoot him. The game gets a lot easier for me. Yeah,
exactly.
So Steed of Tides. And what kind of sneaky plays can you make with Steed of Tides here? Because you took the Arcane Tome specifically for this.
Yeah, so Steed of Tides, what it is, it's a weaker version of Translocate, admittedly, in the fact that it's limited to heroes and it's a casting, or it's a spell. So it can very easily be denied, but at the same time, I can just whip any hero that I have on my list across the table. Outside 9 of enemy units, of course, but it's not keyword locked either, so I can potentially just whip my battle mage across the table for an easy cutting maneuver or something like that. And Foz Protection has a huge range, so I'm not necessarily worried about losing my buffs on that at that point.
Yeah, I really like Foz Protection. It's not wholly within 18, it's just within 18, which is massive. You just, one edge of one model has to be within range of the battle mage, and boom, the whole unit gets the buff. Really good spell. Well, right on, man. I think this is a solid list. I can definitely see Idoneth pivoting into this kind of style more so than the typical Idoneth stuff, which is the Kellyan king, who's built to be a fight king. It's got a turtle. It's got maybe even some eels and sharks in there. But I think this infantry style is definitely stronger, if nothing else.
Just one more note on the Grand Strat is the Creeping Gloomtide. That's just kind of the gimme Grand Strat in this army, frankly.
And what's that? You have a Gloomtide?
You have a Gloomtide that doesn't have any enemy models within 3 inches of it.
Right, and since you're dropping another one into play, or no, actually, you didn't take the double boat here.
No, I feel like doing the double boat is a bit of a liability with the Creeping Gloomtide because it's increasing your chances of getting enemies within it.
Makes sense. Okay, right on, man.
Fun fact about the Creeping Gloomtide: I think Reed has written the Gloomtide shipwreck can get destroyed, and you still win that Grand Strat. Like, it can be smashed to rubble.
Yeah.
Sweet. So you just have a boat.
That should work.
Yep.
James, we've talked about your slippery thralls. Why don't you run us through your shark bait list, which is like the exact opposite, as opposite as you could be from that previous one.
So yeah, last list was a whole lot of nuance. This one is about subtle. Is about as subtle as a bag of hammers. Not much to say about this one, guys. It's 6 sharks, lots of harpoons going off, battle mage of Gur, things go fast.
Super.
Yeah. This is the Iron Jaws of Order treatment.
There we go. We got there. Literally Iron Jaws. Huh?
Yeah, it's got the Fight King, it's got the Tidecaster to get the rituals, and it's got a Battle Mage to go fast. Three reinforced units of Alopexes, and then a turtle, which is basically 2 Alopexes. Yeah, you move forward and you bite stuff.
Yep.
Would you ever consider running a double reinforced unit and then a single, or is it like the 3 doubles? Is that how you like doing it?
I actually like doing two double reinforced units. I just wanted to meet the battle line slot in this one and not have to rely on Thralls or Reavers.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, you could do like 3-2-1 instead of 2-2-2.
That too.
Yeah. Right on. Anything else to say about this one, or is it just like it's fun? You want to use all the sharks? There you go.
It's fun. I wanted to make 3 lists, and this was the Mimi one.
This is how I'd play Idoneth. I don't want to paint any of their infantry. This one here is the only Fyreslayers list we have in our episode. And the reason we're talking about it is because, Mrigank, you took this to a GT recently and you went 5-0 after claiming #1 Stormcast on ITC. You're like, let's try something that's actually challenging. And you decided to pick up these little 4-inch move midgets. Tell us about your list. Tell us why Fyreslayers are doing so well right now, because I think as the data comes in, we will start to see Fyreslayers doing very well. And why you pick these units in particular.
Right, so this list, as I've named it, Grungni's Fury. Fyreslayers is an army that often gets neglected, in my opinion, because, well, maybe people don't like the models because they all just look the same, or maybe they're too expensive. But one of the things that I discussed with a lot of the really good players in Age of Sigmar while I was at LVO was how this new season is all about projecting toughness in the center. And with bounty hunters going away, and you not being able to just shoot support heroes off the board with something like Luminate Sentinels or Idoneth Deepkin Sharks and Turtles or Vanguard Raptors, unless you take the Sharpshooter Battalion, this puts Fyreslayers in a really good spot. They're a faction that lives and dies off its support hero. So, no, I knew how tough Hardguard Berserkers actually are because I actually played them a bit in Season 2, just like borrowed a friend's army. So I called up that friend and was like, yeah, can I just try your Fyreslayers again for a GT, and we'll see how it's like to play an army where I'm not just teleporting Vanguard Raptors and dropping Annihilators on people for once. And yeah, we came up with this. So this list basically is running, the meat of this list is basically the 2 units of 15 Hardguard Berserkers, supported by a Battlesmith with Nulcidian Icon to avoid spell damage, to ignore spells on a 4-up, and then Leadership of the Alpha, so I can issue Rally 3 times, once per game. Battlesmith issues rallies on a 4-up, so all the shooting armies and armies that like to just kill or fight, like Sylvaneth who like to strike and fade, are now going to be regretting their move, because if you don't stay in combat with them, I will just bring the Hardguard Berserkers back. To add to their damage, I took an Auric Runeson who's only 80 points with the Axe of Grimnir to increase their rend and damage to -2 and 3 damage respectively. And in a Galatian Command, if you stay in combat with these guys, they will absolutely ruin you, because Fyreslayers also have a prayer to make a hero fight in the hero phase. So the Auric Runeson gets to fight 3 times in that turn, which is...
remember that Galatian Command thing says if you fought, you can't fight again that phase, and if you fought, you can't use this ability. So that doesn't quite work.
I mean, I'm saying it depends on like where you are, I guess, positioned, I guess, but it's a really good thing for to have the Auric Runeson fight alongside the Hardguard, and he's basically unkillable because you get a 3-up ward with his retinue, and then you get to ward the Hardguard Berserkers on top of that, because it mentions in their battle tome for some reason that they get a ward despite Bodyguard, which no one else gets, which is really good. The other hero on this list is the Auric Runesmiter with the Prayer of Ash. I just took it for the -1 to wound, I think, and because he's a deep striker and this army is really slow. There are some objectives in this new battle on the new battle plans that are like all on the corner edge of the battlefield or like on the flanks of the battlefield, and you need to be able to just take them with a lot of bodies. And sometimes you don't have the movement from your deployment zone to get to them turn 1, so that really helps. The Rune Master is just, I think, an obligatory pick. He knows all the prayers, so I can take Curse pretty easily. I can take the Volatile Brazier on him to increase the range of my invocations, double it effectively, and reroll chanting rolls on those, which is really, really good. Being able to deploy Runic Firewall or a Molten Infernoth in their face turn 1 is really, really amazing. Plus, he generates extra command points next to the General, which I did not use all 5 games because I forgot about it. And finally, this ends with my general with Auric Runefather and Magmadrot. This is a bit of a controversial pick because ideally you don't want your general to be shot, and considering that they can't really shoot your Galatian champions, Heartguard are not worth shooting. He sort of becomes a magnet for all the other kinds of range projection damage that your opponent wants to be doing. But this list does need some mobility, and this is what the Runefather offers. So I turned him essentially into like a slab daddy. Gave him Blood of the Berserker, so once per game he can fight twice. The second time he has to fight last. And the Draught Magmalt Ale, which once per game he can drink it at the start of combat to double his attacks. So, you know, there are turns where you just want something to die and you don't want to invest some Hardguard Berserkers into doing it. So he can move up, drink the Magmalt Ale, you can pop the Rune of Rend, and now he's, you know, 10 attacks, -2 Rend, 3 damage, fighting twice. So just 20 attacks. It just absolutely wrecks people with that combo. And yeah, the main plan for this list was essentially plant my toughness on center objectives, and then opponents who want to play like the movement game really can't take me off of them. So
Yeah, you kind of just sway one way or the other depending on where your opponent goes from the center of the board. It's
basically, yeah. And this list is extremely good at giving away the turn, which is what I really, really like.
Yeah, you've got all your buffs up, you've managed all your prayers, and you have it, and your opponent can't take it away from you until your turn starts. And they probably can't kill you through it between Prayer of Ash and oh man, it's Hearthguard Berserkers are nasty. And
Yep. Now, their only weakness is Roar, but more and more people aren't taking like those elite monster lists that can roar you and, you know, disable your Counterstrike ability. I should mention this, but Fyreslayers have an ability on Heartguard, Auric Heartguard, and Wallguide Berserkers, where if you charge them, they can spend a command point to fight first, or they get the strike first effect at the start of the combat phase. The only things that can really avoid that is if the opponent has a strike first unit on their turn for priority, or if they have roar. And that was not very common in my meta. I think the only unit I was maybe afraid of was Sylvanet Lancers, and only one person was playing them at the tournament. So
Wings.
Terra Wings would do it, yeah.
They'll do it, but yeah, they could do it if they roll over the Bravery.
Just bring 3 units,
yeah,
easy.
Yeah, and there was a Flesh Eater Courts player that I faced in round 2. Is a good friend of mine. He was running 2 Terrageists. But I guess like he was just so afraid of just missing that roar and having his Terrageist nuked off the board, because even if he does, you know, say 12 mortal wounds to my Heartguard, I'm only going to take on average 6.
Yeah, and that's 3 guys. That's only 3 guys lost.
Yeah, that's 3 that's 3 guys, and then I'll probably just hit him back with my Magmadrot, and the other 12 Heartguard Berserkers plus my Rune Sun will probably be standing right there.
Yeah.
So it's overall it's like a really tough proposition to get through, like regardless. And if they leave you alone for even a minute, you just rally all of them back, you know.
Let me ask you some questions about your picks here. First one is, did you manage to get off the dream combo of fighting with the Rune Sun, fighting with the command unit, and then fighting with the retinue, which is the Broadaxe unit?
So my yeah, I actually did. This was in this happened against, I want to say, Flesh Eater Courts, which was also like I think my round 3, where they charged a bunch of flares into me on all sides. So I was able to activate him and and one hard guard and the other hard guard, and it was glorious for a short minute.
The fact that you can't shoot the heroes before you get into combat is such a big deal. Like if you're not running sharpshooters and you're just a melee army, like if you're playing ogres and you have iron blasters, well, iron blasters can't be in sharpshooters. If you're playing sentinels and Lumineth and you're trying to be super greedy and you're going for that battle regiment to try to steal first and get all your buffs up, well, guess what you can't do is shoot any of these heroes that will dictate the game.
Yep. Especially the Battlesmith was the biggest one. The Battlesmith is the first one, in my opinion, that got nuked by any range damage. And I faced a Sylvanet list that had Kurnoth Great Bows, a Sentinel list. They could not do anything to it. And I just kept avoiding half their spells every time. You know, Rune of Searing, if Techless casts Searing Heat, avoid it. If the Nighthaunt unleashes a Purple Sun, avoid it. So super, super good for this list.
Yeah, like we've seen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We've seen how good a 4+ spell ignore is with Stormdrake Guard. Imagine your whole army potentially having a 4+ spell ignore, and that's what the Nilsidian icon offers you.
Yeah, I love this list the way it played. It played like I never thought Fyreslayers could feel this powerful, because
like I said previously, when I tried them, the heroes just got hit, and then your list just fell apart slowly. The only thing I would say is you have to be a little. It's a little complex in terms of managing your movement because you are a slow army. So if you make mistakes in movement, it's very difficult to come back because you can't get anywhere too fast. And it's very easy. And all the heroes in this army have very specific buff ranges. And if you're not careful about maintaining those, and you get greedy and you go, oh, I'm gonna pop the rune of movement, pop the run and charge prayer, and just charge my heart guard into your face all across the board. Well, now you've put your Heartguard Berserkers out of their 9-inch for a ward aura. You've put them out of any buff range, and you're gonna have a bad time. So just be careful about that.
My last question is about the drops here. You went with 8 drops. Obviously, going for Command Battalion, so you can get the Dream double fight scenario. You can get the hero face fighting, but also to open up a battle tactic as well, I assume. Did that ever come in handy, being able to destroy champions or other bodyguards for a battle tactic?
No, because most people don't put their champions in range or ever. I didn't get in a position to fight any champions. I think it came in handy, I think maybe like turn 5 against Nidhogg in my game 1. But by that time the game was over. Like I destroyed their army, like we weren't even like really fighting it out. We just talked it out. But I guess I could have scored that battle tactic where it's like, yeah, destroy a Galatian champion with your Sorin bodyguard or your Galatian champion. Yeah.
Okay. Well, how did you feel about the potential of not getting to choose going first or second? Because you went 8 drops here, and pretty much everything we're seeing these days is like 1 to 4, something like maybe 5 sometimes, right? Everybody's going really low drop lately, and it's because it seems in part that getting an early advantage, getting on the objectives first, scoring cunning maneuver, and then denying your opponent the ability to do the same. You can accrue enough advantages while going first. Were you worried that you wouldn't be able to do that if you had 8 drops?
That's a good question. I actually was, yes, and actually it did come up a couple of times. So again, my match in round 5, the last one against Sylvaneth, it was the battle plan that has the 2 flank objectives, and my biggest worry was that because he was a 1-drop, that he would take the first turn, completely block me off the flank objectives, and just ruin my point taking ability for at least a turn, maybe 2 turns, depending on how the game went. They made a mistake. They didn't take both the flank objectives. They just screened me out of one, and then I was able to deep strike my Rune Smiter towards the other end. But it's situations like that where if you can block movement, I think, yeah, this list can suffer. But unfortunately, you do have tools to mitigate that, because then they open themselves up for a double turn, and you can still threaten them with a 9-inch deep strike charge in that regard.
And if they engage you early, you can use the heroic action to fight in the hero phase, potentially. That's a pretty big threat. Yep,
exactly. Not to mention, like, the other thing that I was really afraid of was, because as you can notice, I took the Auric Runefather on Blood of the Berserker and Magmalt Ale. If they take first turn, you have no runes up. There's a lot of times where they would make me go first. I would activate the +1 to hit rune, position myself in the center with the enhanced effect sometimes, and then say, okay, you come to me. And if I win the priority, I make them come to me, because my entire army is on a +1 to hit and +1 attack, which is a really dangerous position for my opponent to try and attack. But if they go first and try to alpha me, I have no runes up, and I can't even pop the Battlesmith's, like, his ability, his once per game ability. And so that sort of worried me, which makes me think maybe I can drop the Magmalt Ale for that one artifact that gives the Runefather a once per game 3-up ward for a phase, to just avoid the alpha of someone just shooting my Runefather off the board.
Do you think the Magmalt Ale is worth keeping, or just switch over to the defensive rune, because the rest of your list has tons of damage?
I think you can switch over to the defensive rune. I think, like, Blood of the Berserker is good. It just means that instead of just relying on Blood of the Berserker and Magmalt Ale when you have not an ideal rune active, instead of just depending on that, you just need to time when your Runefather is going to go slap something. Because unfortunately his axe only has -1, so you need to make sure you have the Rend rune up to do any real damage. Because when you fight twice, you are fighting last on that second fight. So
so you got to survive it.
Which, again, the defensive artifact helps, because if they don't have shooting and you want to fight last, you can just say, okay, I'm going to declare a 3-up ward, I'm going to fight twice, I'm going to fight last, I have the Rend rune active, so on and so forth.
Cool. Well, congrats on the 5-0. Do you think you're going to play Fyreslayers again, or are you going to go 5-0 with another army now?
I did actually buy Fyreslayers after that.
Okay. There you go.
Yes.
The Fire
So I
Keep
have some
starting up
hardcore-
soon.
Yeah, yeah.
Well deserved, man. Well deserved.
Paul and I are gonna end up with the same armies by the end of this year, I think.
Well, it's all the best armies, you know,
yeah,
aesthetically the best armies.
yeah, yeah.
Oh gosh. Not currently anyway.
Let's take a look at our community contest lists. Coming up in third place here, we have a list by user SidGame. He went for Hammers of Sigmar, and he picked Stormkeep, which right away got me excited about this list because we don't see a lot of Stormkeep lists. We always talk about Signs of the Storm. Let's take a look at some of the choices in here. He's got a Lord Relictor with Master of Magic with Arcane Tome, Celestial Blades, Translocation. Pretty typical. You know, I think High Priest is usually more standard than Master of Magic, but that's okay. A Battle Mage here with Gur, so he's got Wild Form, and then he actually taught him Levitate, which could come in handy on that block of 4 Fulminators. Flying Fulminators are pretty cool. Unfortunately, you can't give them Levitate and Wild Form in this list at the same time, because that would be really something. It's got a Knight Zephyros with Stubborn as a Rhinox. That's the new seasonal enhancement that makes that unit count as 10 models while it's on an objective if there's no other champions on it. So I guess the intent here is the Zephyros is going to be teleporting around and counting as 10 models on objectives. Pretty cool. And the Galatian Sharpshooters are filled with our typical loadout now. 6 long strikes and 2 squads, and then Aether Wings. And then it's got a Redemption Brotherhood battalion, which is a battalion that doesn't see that much play, but it's a unified battalion for 1 drop. So you can stick all your troops in that as a Stormcast army, and that's kind of cool. He's got 4 Fulminators, 2x5 Vindicators, and 2 Stormdrake Guard. So this is actually pretty similar to our starter competitive list. It's opted for more drops, which is interesting, but it's not too far off from what we're recommending people play. I think the biggest difference is the Stormkeep, and I'm not really seeing a reason why this list would want to be Stormkeep. It's only got 2 units of Redeemers that take advantage of the extra rules from Stormkeep. And without the ability to put the long strikes in reserve, there's a lot of matchups where they will just die at the top of round 1, especially if you're not going with a battle regiment to have a single drop. Those long strikes are very exposed.
Yeah. My main criticism was, if I had any to this list, would be that I do not rate long strikes in a Stormkeep list at all, mainly because they have no protection if they have to start on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Stormkeep's weird for shooting, because you can't really use long strikes. They're super risky. Adjudicators with Skybolt bows just don't do enough damage. And crossbows are kind of short range, so you want to be able to drop them into play if you need to. So you're not really left with any super good shooting options if you play Stormkeep, because ballistas are not very good, right? That would be the natural fit, I think. Just thinking thematically and in terms of range and everything, if ballistas were good, Stormkeep would certainly look a lot better.
Mm-hmm. You could do the wild thing and maybe take 20 Sendals.
You could as an ally, yeah. That's an option.
Yeah. But really, let's assume for a second this list switches to 10 cross. Okay, so Vanguard Raptor, he has about 480, so 550 points roughly tied up in shooting. If he reduces that to 400 points with just a unit of 10 Judicators, and for 150 points, maybe he takes another Redeemer unit like Vanquishers, I could see Stormkeep being playable, not as I'm going to deploy Vindicators in a forward position and then tank you out and just hope till my Stormkeep OPSEC takes over, but something like I have all these Vindicators alive around the board. Late game, as we both start losing things, I am going to, pop those with Translocation somewhere and take the objective away from you, even if I'm only 5 models on it.
Yeah, that's not a bad plan, but it's not going to work with long strikes, though, right? You're going to play against an army that has 30-inch shooting, like Ogres or Lumineth, or, even something that can just jump past your screens, right? Like something super fast that can charge and fly. It's just so risky. You have to play so far back with the long strikes, and then that kind of leaves the rest of your army in a weird spot.
Maybe just don't take Stormcast shooting here. Maybe you take what other shooting do we have open to us? We have something like Alopexes open to us. We have
you could go Tempesters. That could be an option.
Yeah. Oh, this is Hammers of Sigmar. You're right. Yeah, we could go Tempesters. That would actually not be bad. And then use the Aether Wing points and the extra 40 points towards another Redeemer unit, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an option. Or Terra Wings. Terra Wings also looking good.
Sure. Terra Wings looking good here. Yeah.
Pretty cool list. Congratulations, Sid, on coming in third place. Called The Hammer of Sigmar by Sluki. This is another Hammers of Sigmar list, this time with Scions of the Storm.
It's a I'm not sure if I would have gone like this. So this is a little bit more reminiscent of the kind of last season style, I guess, if you will. Because this season we've kind of opted to combine the Fulminators. So you see here, like one of the things that immediately stands out is the main or bigger hammers are going to be the Retributors and the Fulminators. So he's gone for a Relictor Battle Mage combo, so we can get those Fulminators and those Retributors out and actually, bonk at things. And you've got a Castellant to go ahead and buff those up before they leave, which is fine. It's just a little bit less, impactful on a min unit like that, in my opinion. But it can still work out great. You don't necessarily have to combine the Fulminators, but I think that we'll see a need for just for doing enough damage at once, right? Like 4 Fulminators looking like something that we might have to go back to. So we've pretty much gone back to that in a lot of our previous lists. But that's what this list is trying to do. Is it's trying to go ahead and use that same combo that we've always used with Relictor Battle Mage. He's got an Azuros, which can be a great combination here. I think I might have paired that Azuros with the Retributors maybe in a battalion. I see here he's trying to go for. I don't know if I would have picked the Redemption Brotherhood here. You got room with the Command Entourage to take out the Azuros and stick it with the Retributors. Move everything around. But otherwise, yeah, the list it's pretty standard. You got to have the Azuros going with the Retributors to use Unleash That Hatred, so that's another thing to think about. I think it's a pretty decent list. The Sequitors is kind of cool to have as well. It's kind of a little bit of an upgrade unit. If you got the points to go up. He was at 1990 without him. It's like 10 points. It doesn't really matter. You could want the Triumph there, but it's not like you're not really going to get it in a lot of situations. But
Yeah, I think most of the time, unless you're 1980, I don't think you're going to get a Triumph like 90% of the time.
Yeah, like I pretty much don't think I'm going to get the Triumph. I honestly think like 1970, Lately lists have been a lot closer to 2000 actually. The more I've looked at it, the more lists I've seen. So there's that for what it's worth. Pretty decent list though. It's got a lot of things that go around. There's just a few things. Like I said, I'd probably add in the new Galatian Command, right? Battalion. Is that the one with the hero and chosen Swarm Bodyguard?
Yeah.
Yep, Swarm Bodyguard. So I would have probably stuck the Azuros and the Retributors in there to really combo Unleash That Hatred a little, or they're gonna have to roll together pretty much, those two units. So yeah, pretty decent list all around.
It could be the Azuros in there. It could also be the Castellan. If you give him Tunnel Master, for example, because I noticed that this list doesn't have an aspect of the champion picked.
There isn't one, yeah.
Yeah, so you
definitely
could just
Tunnel Master on the Castellan.
Yep. I think you nailed it when you were saying that. Or I think our preference this season is reinforced blocks of Fulminators. I know in previous seasons we discussed 2x2 being a valid swap, just because the damage output wasn't as high as you needed it to be. Or sorry, the damage requirement wasn't there, and just more tactical flexibility. But I think this season you want damage. You want to hit something as hard as possible in a single activation, and then take no damage in return. So I think a 4-block of Fulminators would make more sense here. I'd probably make that change, and I would definitely run that battalion as you suggested it, with either the Castellant or the Azuros in Galatian Command. One of the things that's underappreciated about that battalion is that it gives you access to a battle tactic. And it may not come up, but having the option to do another battle tactic is a good thing, especially for our army. If you're playing with just the Stormcast tactics and then like the 3 main ones, having a 4th one that you can reliably score is nice. Because every army will have a GC pretty much. The tactic I'm referencing is the one where your Sworn Bodyguard has to destroy a champion or Sworn Bodyguard.
Or champion.
Right.
You can still do that with a champion.
Yep. Probably won't, but maybe.
It probably won't, yeah. But hey, it's up there, and they don't have to be like next to each other or using the special command or anything like that. It just has to be that they are in that battalion at all, or champion by itself.
Yep. So again, pretty solid list. Pretty close to where we landed with our list building this season. It's interesting to see just how close that came. Well, one last thing I will mention about this list is it actually tied for third place with the other list that we just talked about previously. The second place list is called The Church Will Overcome by Dr. Mitranos. This is a Scions of the Storm list.
Everyone went Hammers of Sigmar.
They're all Hammers of Sigmar, man. This is another Hammers of Sigmar list, and it has some choices in here. choices that I would not make. Like, for example, having a Toralon with High Priest is not a choice I would ever make.
I think he may have just, default, like, added on things. I don't know. I sometimes get, orc brain just kind of putting things in sometimes that I'm used to.
Maybe he knows something we don't. Maybe not the Toleron will become a priest in the next FAQ.
Dude. I wish.
Well, High Priest aside, let's just look at the core of the list. It's got Toralon, Knight Arcanum, Knight Incantor, Knight Azeros as your supporting core. And then for Hammers, it's got 10 Protectors, 6 Dracolines in 2 squads, and then a total of 20 Sequitors. So it's running all melee. There's no shooting in this list at all. And for spells, it takes Thundershock on the Toralon, which I actually really like. I quite like taking Thundershock on a fast flying hero monster like that, who can get up and then cast that spell. All of these units will have +1 hit because you'll just run them up together. And then maybe like the one unit that doesn't get +1 hit from the Comet Trail will just use all out attack. It has a Knight Azeros with 10 Protectors and Galatian Command, so if you ever get stuck in the middle in a position where you can take advantage of that with fighting in the hero phase, that's pretty cool. Starfall is definitely not a spell that I would pick right now. There's too many limitations on it. The fact that you have to roll a 3+ for it to activate, and then it only lasts for your turn, really limits the power of this spell. Because typically the stuff that you will charge, you're just going to kill. So this spell is really only useful for stopping things from piling in against you. And we just have shooting that can take care of stuff like that, right? So it's kind of like... But when you play all melee, Starfall looks a little bit better. Because there is no shooting in this list to kind of do that. So Starfall makes a little bit more sense here than it would normally. What do you guys think about the Drake Scale armor? That's something we've kind of been ignoring for most of our edition.
It's interesting pick. I wonder if he's doing that because I guess like ogres have like multiple damage shots now, so you can reroll saves against them. So if you're on Finest Hour, Mystic Shield, and all that defense, you'll be on a 4-up save, a 4-up rerollable.
Yeah, but into the shooting, it's still... Actually, I don't think this works with shooting, right?
What?
Drake Skill Armor?
Pretty sure it does. It's just all damage of,
Because
more
they
than
have
one.
D3 +3 shooting, which is unfortunate.
Well, no, so D3 was ruled as not 1. D3 +3 is more than 1, because it's 3 plus D3.
Oh, so they did... Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because D3 plus D3 can never be 1.
That's fair.
But
yeah,
D3
no.
could be 1. Yeah.
I just didn't know if they did some randomness on that. Actually, that makes sense. Yeah, because they ruled it as yeah, I could see it. That's fair. That's probably like the only situation, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know of a lot of other
really...
maybe other Stormcast players with Raptors. Maybe that's why.
Maybe. Seems like a Mirror Shield would just be better.
Yeah.
Maybe he wants to get the Toleron into combat later on. If you can notice, he gave it like Celestial Instinct too, which I think is the run and charge one, or retreat and charge.
Retreat and charge, yeah.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that if you're retreating, you're not activating Comet Trail. It's better than being stuck in combat and not moving, but ideally you just don't want your Toralon in combat. The only time you ever get him in is so that he can roar as you're attacking with something like 4 Fulminators or 10 Projectors who can kill something, and then next turn the Toralon is freed up to move around normally. I'm also...
Yeah, definitely. I think I think Scintillating Trail would just been better, I think.
The 10 block of Sequitors is also going to have some trouble with cohesion and 1-inch range weapons. I think that's the kind of unit you want to use in a Galatian Veterans Battalion and not in a Battle Regiment Battalion. And then I
didn't even see that.
I think if you're going to run the Knight Azuros with 10 Protectors, you definitely want to run the Quicksilver Draft. That combo just fits perfectly here. That would make this list a lot better overall. I think having that like once per game, this unit is just unfightable. Like if you come in here, you're gonna die, man. So you better have some other answer for this. If you're curious about that, we will have a video about that specific combo coming soon. So certainly not the kind of list that I would put together. I love having a mix of melee and shooting. I like having, a reinforced fast unit of fulminators or something like that. Seems really good. The melee hammers are set up pretty well here. I think it's just like cut the 10 sequitors, cut 3 evocators, add in some shooting, fix up the hero spell selection and enhancements, and I think this is not a bad list at all.
Yeah.
And our first place list was submitted by kietbizten, who's a longtime listener of the podcast.
We called it?
He called it One Up Dragon, and I stand by that story.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's definitely how that went down. Anyways, if you join our Discord, you can have a lot of great conversations and, learn about the true names of things.
Very mature people.
Yeah, it's very mature.
Dan, take us away.
Yeah, I love this list. It's great. It's definitely, if you've seen Stark talk lists in the Discord, it's awesome. Or kietbizten, you'll see him under kietbizten, but his name is Stark, and great guy, good friend of the podcast. If Jack was here, he'd be like, yeah, he's awesome. But yeah, Stark is really cool, and every time he makes lists, he's very thoughtful and methodical about them. And this one, it speaks to me particularly because it plays very similarly to Dueling Dragons, which is very near and dear to my heart. It's similar, but it's definitely its own flavor. 100%. I love this list. So you've got a Relictor with Translocate, normal stuff. It's great to have the Translocate when you've got, good mobile units like this still. Mobility is still going to be king in the game. Even though I usually don't run a Relictor, this is probably actually one of the things that I would consider swapping out in this list. But moving on, the real meat of the list is the double Castellan and 4 Tempester, 4 Stormdrake Guard combo. So the idea is to make these dragons, right? You've still got Tempesters there, horse dragons or whatever we're calling them. Make them +1 to save, and they're still gonna have the 6-up ward from hammers, not quite Gardas level, but still really good. We can't fit Gardas here. Like the Relictor could be Gardas, but then you'd be 10 points over because nerfs. Anyways, yeah, it's going to be a good list. It's going to play really similarly. You've got the 4 Tempesters as your really mobile shooting hammer instead of 10 crossbows, and the Stormdrake Guard is still going to be really good. Unfortunately, the Castellan can't double, if you wanted to try to double buff a Stormdrake. Due to the wording of the ability, you can't double buff it, but it's still a really good ability, and it's good to have the Tempesters also being on a +1 to save. To round it all out, he's got Sequitors. Actually, maybe you could put Sequitors, make Gardas. There's points there. Anyways, there's definitely stuff to play around with. The Sequitors are still going to be great though. In combat, 5-up ward is pretty relevant. Sometimes screens just get kind of shot off by shooting, and they're going to die the same as Vanquishers. That's probably fine. But in combat, it's nice to have the 5 ward. Sometimes you high roll. It's good. And then round it out a Stormstrike Chariot. Oh, what?
Why do you think he took Sequitors instead of Liberators?
I have to assume it's just because melee threats he's more worried about than like shooting threats here.
Sequitors are like one of the hardier ones that can actually take some damage from chaff, but also deal it out. Like they have 3 Grand Mace or 2 Grand Maces, 3 Grand Maces. In like rare scenarios, you could, if like Nikon charges into your screen and fails to delete a Sequitur unit, you could stop Resurrection from the Guardian of Souls.
Yeah, so. They can't make your ward go down. Definitely possible. It's not like they're not gonna change the game, but they will come through every once in a while. A little more than Vanquisher sometimes. So that's pretty neat. But yeah, right out with the Stormstrike Chariot to more mobility, good stuff. Great multi-charger, right? Charge mortals are just good. The Chariot we're probably using a little less this season just because our points are getting slowly whittled down on our margins. And we want to make sure we maximize everything, but the Chariot is still a great, efficient piece. It rounds out the list nicely. And this plays the mid board, and that's what the season really wants, is to play the mid board. You're not worried about sharpshooters getting Galatian veterans, because you can chew through stuff with Tempesters and with the Stormdrake Guard.
Yeah, I think going battle regime here is really good because of the relatively short threat ranges on Tempesters and Stormdrakes, right? They don't have 18-inch or 30-inch like some of our other shooting. They're 12. So they're kind of a mid board shooting kind of option. And
you want to make your opponent go first and maybe counter drop the Tempesters, because Tempesters do good damage out of a drop. Use their 12-inch range and hit something that could be worth shooting.
Yeah, and in that situation, you just give the other Castellan Lantern to the Chariot instead of the Tempesters.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can always use it. Even the Sequitors could use it in some situations,
Mm-hmm. Yep, I like the call for aid pick here as well. Being able to do sneaky stuff with teleport a Lord Castellan over to one flank, translocate a Lord Relic to the other flank, and then when your Secutors die, well, which one are they being revived at? You don't know. It could go either way. I like Call for Aid as like a pseudo teleport as well. It's pretty neat. So solid list. I hadn't really thought that much about putting Tempesters and Stormdrakes together. They don't seem to fit naturally as a combo, but when both of them are on a 2-up save, that's a different story. A 2-up save shooting hammer unit with Tempesters is good. That's a good combo, yeah. And in fact, it's so good that Golden Tempest list I had earlier had 6 of them. So there's definitely some value there.
Yeah, I think I would like personally. Oh yeah, for sure. It's a good list.
It's like we normally have one unit that demands all of our buff attention. Like in Dueling Dragons, for instance, you're essentially stacking buffs on one unit of dragons. This is a lot closer to Uppsala Dragons, but instead of the 2 blocks of 4 Stormdrake Guard, it's going for like the 4 block of Tempesters. And I think I like that better. It gives you a slightly less of a footprint and a more mobile threat that can like really deal with hordes pretty efficiently.
Yeah, well, I like the Oops list a lot. I think it has a little bit less play this season compared to like Dueling Dragons or something like this. And I like this a lot. I think I would personally, because I'm a fan of not running a Relictor in this list, and especially now this season, I would actually cut the Relictor, bring my Sequitors down to like Vanquishers, and bring Gardas.
They could just cut the Relictor entirely? That's interesting.
Yeah, I just bring Gardas. And because Gardas Dragons, it's too good. Even if my Tempesters aren't getting it all the time or some of the time.
So that wouldn't work because you'd be missing a battle line.
Hammers.
That's to be why hammers, yeah.
Never mind, yep.
You'd have to cut the Chariot.
My brain just kind of... Yep. Brain fart. Yeah. Darn it. Still a great list. Like I said, definitely join our Discord. We have great people like Stark who also talk lists besides us, and really insightful people. This is the classic Stark list, just taking something that we just hadn't put together yet and just going, hey guys, what about this? And it's like, yo, that's pretty good.
Yeah, a lot of
really good.
A lot of the lists I come up with are a result of either directly or indirectly the conversations we have on the Discord server. I'll be talking about something, and then all of a sudden, like, hey, what about 6 Tempesters? Or Drakeshorn is only 400 points. What about Karazai now with that guy? So these little ideas just pop into my head because of the Discord community. So wanted to give back.
100%.
And I like doing these episodes, and I definitely want to see more lists come out of people. And that wraps up this episode of Lords of the Storm. Thanks everybody for watching. Everybody, really, I'm just amazed that people enjoy listening to us talk. I still can't believe that. That's such a novelty. But also a big shout out to our Patreon supporters and YouTube members. You guys give us the funding we need to justify spending so much time making this and hosting the community and everything. So thank you very much for all your support.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. And I think one of the best ways you guys can support us, even if you don't want to give us any money, that's totally fine. I'd rather prefer you join our Discord and join our conversation. Honestly, like that's why we do this. This is a hobby for us, and we love to talk about these lists. We talk about other armies. We've got battle reports that happen all the time. I love seeing the battle reports every day. There's like 2 to 3 battle reports, I swear, just on random days, even during the week, and especially on the weekend. I love seeing them. Please, guys, keep posting them. They're awesome. I get feedback. I get to, see what taking this this discussion and putting it on the table and actually, you know, playing it out is very different from just theory crafting all day, which is, you know, great and all, but putting it into practice, that's what it's all about, getting out there and playing your models. Like seeing people's models in the hobby section. Holy crap, you guys are amazing artists. And with that, our community contests are a lot of fun as well. It's awesome because you can get ideas too for your army. If you're not sure what you want to do, get some ideas from someone else. Ask them how they did it, and you know, learn some new techniques. Pretty good. And one of my favorite parts of the Discord, I check in all the time, just to check out Met's lore corner. Metroid is one of our regulars in the Discord who, he just knows every like thing about the lore. You know, you're like, hey, what does, you know, Sigmar think about this? What do, you know, why do Retributors have that weird animal on their arm? You know, like just different random facts and awesome information. If you're, you know, wondering what storm host you'd want to like rep or something, you know, maybe you can learn something there. There's a lot of cool stuff you can learn. Yeah, give Matt an ask, and we have several people that also, you know, answer questions, but Matt is just so prolific, so we renamed the channel after him, which is hilarious.
If you think we missed anything, or if you think we're wrong, either way, leave us a comment down below. We like reading the comments. I'm reading them every single day since we started the podcast. It's just wild to me that so many people watch our stuff. You can also consider supporting us by becoming a member on YouTube or joining us on patreon.com/Stormkeep. Or you can check out our sponsor, Kaiju Gaming Lounge. They have dice and range sticks, like we mentioned at the start of the podcast. So check them out too. In terms of upcoming episodes for the podcast, we are working on a shorter video called Drops and Battalions, kind of going back to basics. I think a lot of people have questions about that concept, so we're going to do a video breaking it down. We have a How to Counter Tzeentch video in the works, and we'll be doing a series of list spotlights based on whatever list you guys want us to talk about. So pick your favorite list from this video, and we will make short little videos about that list in particular, going over deployments, talking about what units we picked, why we picked them, how to use them, which tactics to go for, which battle plans are good for that sort of thing, good and bad matchups. Like, we just want to go in depth on whatever list from this video you guys want to talk about. So leave your thoughts in the comments down below, which list you'd like to see a whole video about. And there's more stuff that we're just not ready to talk about yet. So lots more coming on the Stormkeep. Thank you.
We have the Realm Report coming up.
Yeah, we have another live stream coming up. We're going to be looking at tournament results from the first month or so of Season 2, looking at how many battalions and drops and what armies people are playing. That should be interesting, especially because we've got some wild changes coming with like beasts and gits and Caradron on the horizon. There's so many changes coming to the game. It's going to be wild to track it all.
Well, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
As always, see you in the next one.
See you guys.